I feel like everybody was here really. We're one of the things we were trained about. The worst you can do is stop. You got to keep moving. It's not good. It's not healthy, and it's certainly not the Rav of the Rebbe. L'chaim, everybody. L'chaim, Shalom Aleichem. L'chaim, L'chaim.
Is that beer? That's good for that.
Oh, we need his napkins.
Yeah, we need napkins. That's too hard to pass.
Oh, very good. I got. Thank you. So Rabbi Sai, thank you. I want to start this Farbrengen talking about Yossi Lagani. I'll try not to bore you. If you fall asleep, I'll get the message and I'll change the subject. The story of Yossi Lagani is that the previous Rebbe wrote and prepared a maimer that was meant to be for the yahrzeit of his grandmother who passed away Yud Shevat, and his mother who passed away Yud Gimel Shevat, and then put him, and then, I'm sorry? His grandmother passed away Yud Shevat, his mother passed away Yud Gimel Shevat, and his father passed away Beis Nisan. So the maimer had 4 parts. 3 of them were for yahrzeits. Yud Shevat is his grandmother, Yud Gimel Shevat is his mother, then put him, and Beis Nisan would have been the yahrzeit of his father. That's what he planned it. And then he passed away himself. Nostalgic. And the Rebbe, of course, would always refer to this maimer as the maimer of Hilula, the yahrzeit, even though the Rebbe officially gave it out for another purpose, since it turned out to be his own nostalgus. And Bechal, everything is Ba'ashgocha Pratis. And by a Rebbe, by a tzaddik, that they know everything. They mamish know everything. So the Rebbe planned it this way. The Rebbe planned it this way. So this becomes the maimer of nostalgus. One of the interesting little details about this maimer is that the maimer was actually written and said in Tafresh Pei Gimel, 1923. Word for word. It was reissued. And the Rebbe, our Rebbe, was visiting the Frierdiker Rebbe basically for the first time. He had come a couple of months before. This was his second visit. And the Rebbe, the previous Rebbe, said the maimer Yossi Lagani. The Rebbe was 20 years old. The Rebbe just showed up in Rostov by the previous Rebbe. And the 2 Shabbos that the Rebbe was there, the Rebbe said the Yossi Lagani. And the Hergish that Hasidim have was the previous Rebbe knew who the Rebbe was. And he said the maimer right away in anticipation of what would become relevant many, many years later. The Rebbe has a tradition, as we all know, that every year he reviews one chapter. Every year he reviews one Pedic. So in 1951 he reviewed chapter 1. In 1952 he reviewed chapter 2, and so on. And in 1970 he finished the complete cycle. So Lamed Af, 1971 he started again. He did Pedic Aleph. The most recent Yossi Lagani was said 12 days before the Rebbetzin passed in 1988, Tafshin Memches. After the Rebbetzin passed, after the Rebbe lost his Rebbetzin, he basically stopped saying Maimonides Chassidus. So the following year there was no Yossi Lagani. So every year the Rebbe would study one chapter. This year is chapter 15. You look like Mendy Shapiro. Not Mendy Shapiro. You're not his son either, right? Okay. Pardon me?
No, I was looking for your live link. Someone's asking.
It's on. It should be on live.
Yeah, it's on.
Every year the Rebbe studies one chapter. For the scholars, for the really deep experts of Chassidus, this Yossi Lagani, 1965, Tafshin Tezvav, is a very, very big problem. It's a very hard maimer to learn. And the reason is because it's really an introduction to next year's. Chapter 15 is a segue. It's setting up the idea that he wants to talk about, he's going to talk about in the next year's maimer. So when you study chapter 15, you're studying something which is really incomplete. And the Rebbe studies each chapter as an entity unto itself. So here you have to figure out how to make a bridge, make something which is serving something else, become an entity unto itself. It's one of the big struggles of this year. People who are really trying to understand Pedic Tezvav, chapter 15, with the Maimorim from 1965 and 1985, they're all running into the same problem because they don't see the point. The Maimor doesn't seem to have a point. I don't want to get too caught up in the esoterica, but I do want to share with you the idea. And I'll try to finish this before the Super Bowlers show up, and then the Farbrengen will take on a little bit of a different madrig. I'm taking advantage of the fact that if you're here, you're an earnest person. And I'm sharing with you this idea. The Maimed of the previous Rebbe, as you know, talks about a war.
Sorry, thank you.
And that there is a king who has to win this war. He can't lose it, because if he loses the war, he loses everything. It's called Milchemes Nitzachon, a war that you can't lose. And of course, this is, as we know it, Milchemes Beis David, the war to bring Mashiach. And you can't lose this war. So when you have such a battle, kings do extreme things. Number one, they personally engage. They don't let their generals run the war. They run the war personally. And number two, they dispense of the treasure. There's a treasure which is normally kept secret, and they dispense of the treasure. So the previous Rebbe in the beginning of chapter 12 begins with the words, what does it mean mystically? What does it mean in Kabbalah terms? That Hashem has treasure. Hashem has something that he normally hides, and under unusual circumstances, this treasure is dispensed. And of course, the way the Maimer goes, the treasure is given to the generals and to the officers, but it's meant for the foot soldier. It's meant for the simple Yid. This is us, who is involved in this struggle, that the Eibishter gives us this treasure. So the Friedrich Rebbe asks the question, the previous Rebbe asks the question, so what is the supernal treasure? What is it? And he goes off into a very deep idea in Kabbalah that says, Ein Seif l'mayla adin ketzel l'mata adin tachlis. Ein Seif means godliness. Ein Seif doesn't mean God. God, if you have to give him a label, which is a very bad idea, is Ein Tchila. Has no beginning. Ein Seif, that has no end, doesn't refer to God. It refers to God with a last name. Godliness. Elokus, as we call it. And godliness has two characteristics. Characteristic number one, you can't possibly hide it. Wherever you look, you'll find it. And characteristic number two, as hard as you look for it, you never truly identify it. That's how you read it. Ein Seif l'mata dein tachlis, wherever you look, you're going to find him. And Ein Sof l'mata dein ketz means as hard as you're going to look, you'll really never know what it is. And it takes him 3 chapters to explain what it means, that you'll find God everywhere. As much as you think you can't find him, wherever you look, Hashem makes an appearance everywhere. That's called Ein Seif l'mata dein tachlis. As much as you try to hide him, he shows up. He's present. There's a skit that was made in the 80s that's so special. It's a Hanukkah skit. It's done in animation, and it's called Light. It's about Hanukkah. I've never seen anything that comes close to it in terms of bringing out a point that's very chassidish, very deep, that a child can understand. The skit revolves around letters. There's the Hebrew letters, and there's the Greek letters. And in this skit, the Greek letters they're made to be very beautiful. They're very square, and they're very strong, and they're very firm. And the Hebrew letters look faded, they're old. But the Hebrew letters have a fire on top of it, a flame. And you have these little children walking around with the Hebrew letters, and there's this big Misyavni, this big angry guy, who's trying to trade the old Hebrew letters for the wonderfully modern Greek letters. And the kids run away from him, and he chases after them. There's one point in the animation where this Misyavni encounters a Hebrew letter. And the Hebrew letter is not impressive. It's faded and it's old. But the fire makes him crazy. The little light that he sees on top of it makes him nuts. So he takes a big machete. He's trying to kill the fire. He's trying to kill, but you can't kill the fire because it's not there. That's lamata dein tachlis. As much as you try to make believe the Eibishter isn't, he is. That's the first discussion. Our Pedic 1965 Tavshin Tezvav, the Rebbe begins discussing L'mayla dein ketz, which is the opposite idea. That what godliness truly is, we'll never know. He's going to really explain it next year. This year, all he explains is Tzimtzum. All he explains is the notion that in order for there to be a world, God hides. Now, the Rebbe could say in the Maimed of this year that this is a segue to next year, but he doesn't want to do it. He wants this Maimed to become an entity unto itself.
It's hard not to peak.
It's hard not to peak.
Because also the Rebbe says which one is higher. The Rebbe says which one is higher.
The what the Rebbe does is in our Pedic, in the Maimed that's for this year, is he talks about the idea that in order for the world to be, Hashem hides. And he hides more and more, hides higher and higher. In 1985, the Rebbe said things that he's never said before. Lubavitch was going out of its mind. Tzimtzumim way higher than the first Tzimtzum. For the people who've learned the Maimed, I hope you have parachutes, I hope you're okay. But the point is that in our chapter, we don't really talk about the presence of godliness, we talk about the concealment of godliness. So the point that the Rebbe makes out of our chapter, so that it should mean something other than that Hashem is hiding, basically is the idea that when Hashem hides, He's not someplace else. The notion of tzimtzum, the notion that Hashem, so to speak, removes His divine presence, light, godliness, to make space for the world, doesn't mean He went away. It means it's hidden in the world. And that's the key to the Maimed of this year. And when you don't see God, when God is hiding from you, His hiding is not that He went off someplace else. His hiding is that He's hidden in the concealment. Like you have about you. The Gemara says, the Gemara asks the question, where do you have the word Esther in the Chumash, right? We know that every single name is written in the Chumash. The Gemara asks, where do you have the name Esther in the Torah? And the Gemara answers, it says, he says, I'm going to hide my face. And there's a double expression of Esther. Both words are the same root as Esther. I'm going to hide my face. And the Chassidus, the Baal Shem Tov says on this pasuk, the double expression, means that the Hester is also behester. The concealment of God is itself concealed. You don't even see that its godliness concealed. But the pasuk says, Panai, my face, the essence, the countenance of God, the face of God, the inner idea. So in our Maimed, in 1965, the Rebbe says that whenever it seems to us that Hashem is hiding, He's in the hiddenness. He's not someplace else. He's in the hiddenness. Or if you wanted to say it in the most esoteric terms, there's a concept in Chassidus and in Kabbalah called the face of God. What happens when you see the face of God? What does the face of God look like? What is the face of God? So I'll give you the Chassidus very quickly, okay? The face has 3 levels. You have big holes, the nostrils, the eyes, the ears, the mouth, that represent great revelation. You have little holes, which are the hair, that represent a different kind of revelation. And then you have the mask. The mask is the forehead and the 2 cheeks. The mask covers, you don't see anything. So the Ramari Chassidus give you 2 extremes. One extreme is the face of God hides, it doesn't allow you to see anything. And the other extreme is Chochmas Adam Ta'ir Panav. The face of God reveals the whole truth. And this is an interesting phenomenon. Sometimes you look directly at the Eibishter, and in your view you're seeing nothing. Because the two are equal and opposite. When Hashem reveals a little bit, you see it. When He reveals a little more, maybe you see it. But when He reveals everything, if you merit, you see that you're seeing everything. And if you don't merit, it's a blank. That's how Chassidus explains the face of God. Panim. The panim of Hashem, the face of God, you could look straight at it. You're looking at Him and you see a mask. You don't see Him. Why? Because He's not communicating to you in the kind of way that you can process, that you can interpret, that you can personalize. It's the face of God. But if you merit, you see that it's panim, it's the face of Elokus. This is the concept of this Pedic. I'm not going to say this is the language of the Pedic. The concept of our Pedic is Hashem hides. And when Hashem hides, you don't see Him. That's not a good thing. It says that in the hiddenness you have Hashem. And in some ways in the hiddenness you have more of Hashem. When you see, if you could see God, it's not God you're seeing. It's a simple, logical truth. If you could interpret God, it's not God you're interpreting. Because the truth, with a capital T, you can neither see nor interpret. So the mask, when Hashem is hiding, in fact, is Hashem present in a way that we cannot see and we cannot process because it's not qualified, it's not interpreted, it's not watered down. It is the truth.
You can experience it with your neshama. I'm asking. Does this apply
the questions
day to
wait.
day?
The questions wait till after midnight. Mahalt noch nicht bakashes. I just feel like the Matzev that we're in, the Jewish people. I don't know, I shouldn't call myself superstitious. I don't think I'm superstitious, but I got hang-ups. If you will look at the Rebbe's capital and the Rebbe's capital, the capital of the Rebbe now and the Rebbe's capital now, which means Chaf Hey Yoder, we're going to stop saying the Rebbe's capital Kuf Chav Dal, we're saying Kuf Chaf Hey, it becomes much geschmacker. If you look at the capital of the Rebbe and the Rebbe's, both of them, they describe concealment. I told to some people that the Rebbetzin was born more than a year before the Rebbe. So that before we start saying Kuf Chav Dal for the Rebbe, we'll be saying Kuf Chaf Hey for the Rebbetzin. If you pay attention, you'll realize that the Psalms that we're reading for the Rebbe and the Rebbetzin are describing Hashem hiding, a mask. Luli Hashem Chahai Salanu. Look inside, you'll see. We're holding Mamish Erev Mashiach. I think we all believe that. But it's a very, very strange time. And one person takes a look at the world and says, oh no, it's terrible. Another person takes a look at the same world, he sees it's incredible. Because this is what happens when you're looking at the Eibishter as the Eibishter hides. And I believe that's what the Rebbe says about our chapter. Next year he's going to give it a label. He's going to give it a level. It's going to become a thing. It's going to become a level of godliness. This chapter is not a level of godliness. The previous Rebbe's words that dominate our Pedic is which means the idea of chapter 15 is that Hashem is hiding. But in the hiddenness, sometimes there's more of the truth than there is in the revelation. And as a Benji, when I have Benji and Ariel, it becomes very interesting. Sometimes they argue with each other, so I get to stay out of it. But okay, we'll see how the Farbrengen goes. Where's Hashem?
Where's Ariel?
There's a football game, excuse me.
No. He could care less.
Oh, so he's busy with something else. Baruch Hashem. In any case, I feel like this is what the Rebbe is trying to teach us in this Pedic. And this is something which is real to life. As he said, it's true. Sometimes it seems to us like the world is taking its own course and we don't see the hand of God, we don't see the direction, we don't see the support, we don't have the clarity. But if you look a little differently, you see that exactly what is what is supposed to be. So I wanted to share that before the football game ends. And I want to say l'chaim to us and to every single Jew in the whole world, that Hashem should bless us all.
Amen.
That this, upon him, the face of God, which may seem like a mask, shouldn't change into something else. But that we should see that this upon him is Pnei Elokim. We should see that this face is actually the face of God. And it's demonstrating and it's revealing the maximum ahava, mamish, the maximum love that there is from HaKadosh Baruch Hu to Knesset Yisrael, to each one of us. And Hashem to bless all, we should be zeichet in our own lives to feel that close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And then we'll have the right attitude, and we'll live the right way, and we'll have all the right brachas, not only as individuals, but as a family of Jewish people. Okay, it's for us it's Shevat. So a little later we'll actually see the Alter Rebbe's Niggin. But the Revival, let's start with the Beinani, which is the Niggin from Friedrich and Rebbe. It's too high. We all know that when the when the Friedrich Rebbe passed away, the Rebbe refused to become a Rebbe, as we know. Rabbi Dubov from Manchester happened to be in New York because his son Label got married on Thursday night. Mamish, the night before. He knew the Rebbe from Riga. When the previous Rebbe came from Russia in 1927, Pechas was still 27, Rabbi Dubov lived in Riga. I have relatives who are his Eineklach. So one of them told me that when the previous Rebbe came out of Russia, he needed a job. He needed a job, He needed a job. He didn't need a job for money. He needed a job to have a right to live. So Rabbi Dubov vacated his Rabbonis. He gave up his shul. So the Friedrich had a job. He had a Rabbonis. The result of this, Rabbi Dubov moved to England. So it saved his life. When the Holocaust came, he was not in mainland Europe. He was in England. Rabbi Dubov saw the Rebbe then. The Rebbe was then 26 years old. And he right away understood that this is something else. So the Rebbe, the Levi, the Friedrich passed away Shabbos. The Friedrich passed away on Shabbos. The Levi was Sunday. Tuesday, the Rebbe already went. Remember, the Rebbe was not a oval. The Rebbe was a son-in-law. He had no obligation to sit shiva. The daughters had to sit shiva. The wife had to sit shiva. The Rebbe was not an oval. So Tuesday, which was the 13th day of Shevat, the Rebbe went to the first time to the resting place of the previous Rebbe. It was a mound of earth. There wasn't even a tombstone. There's photos of the Rebbe standing next to this mound of earth. Rabbi Dubov stood next to the Rebbe, and he waited for the Rebbe to finish what he had to do. And as soon as he finished, he said to the Rebbe, 3 days after the Rebbe passed, Biz yestig event the Rebbe with ich zentir. Until now it was the previous Rebbe, and now it's your turn. And the Rebbe snapped back. The Rebbe leapt. The Rebbe is living. Like, don't even think about it. And there's all kinds of periods, evolution, you know. The Rebbe at some point actually threatened to run away. So I'll disappear. I'll run away from New York. You'll never find me. There's a whole bunch of steps in the story of how the Rebbe sort of reluctantly went from being a non-Rebbe to a Rebbe. And one of the big issues was, he said, the previous Rebbe never told him. It's actually a story. of a Yid. A Jew went over to the Rebbe during that year and he suggested the Rebbe to be a Rebbe, so the Rebbe said, I was never told. So he tells the Rebbe, it's very hard for me to believe that you were never told. So he says to the Rebbe, you think I'm a liar? The Rebbe says to him, you think I'm a liar? So he gives the Rebbe a whole song and dance that the Rebbe Rashab, the Frierdiker Rebbe's father, when his father had passed, he said he had no Hayrah. And we found out later that before his bar mitzvah, as a 12-year-old, the Rebbe Marash told him that he's a Rebbe. So he says to our Rebbe, he was told before bar mitzvah is supposed to be a Rebbe. Then when his father passes away, he had no instructions. So he says in Yiddish, Nu das von der Sache, was man kann nicht verstehen. These are from those things what we can make sense out of. And then he tells the Rebbe, Punkt, wie wir können das nicht verstehen, can man das nicht verstehen. But just we don't understand what the Rebbe Rashab meant when he said he had no Eirah, when he clearly did. When the Rebbe says he wasn't told, it's one of those things we can't explain. And the Rebbe cracked up. He laughed. You know why? Because it was the simple truth of the matter. But there's a lot of little things that are fascinating. And one of them is the Rebbe kept a journal. Our Rebbe kept a journal. And the Rebbe's journal includes only his conversations with the previous Rebbe. And there are some things in that journal that are really extraordinary. And one of them is the following story. I'm saying it in light of what I said a few minutes ago. That one day, the Rebbe was by his father-in-law. The Frierdiker Rebbe was, I don't know if he was in Riga or in Poland. Remember, the Rebbe was not with the Frierdiker Rebbe. The Rebbe was in Germany and in France, and the previous Rebbe was in Latvia and in Poland. And part of the reason, a significant part of the reason was because the Latvian government and the Polish government did not give the Rebbe permission to live because the Rebbe never applied for citizenship. The Frierdiker Rebbe came to Latvia, he applied for Latvian citizenship. It took him 5 years to become a citizen. As soon as he became a Latvian citizen, he moved to Poland, and it saved his life. Because when the war came, on his door, I heard it from a Yid who saw it with his eyes, Rabbi Garfinkel, on the door of the Rebbe's apartment, it said, the people living here are Latvian citizens. So the Germans who occupied Poland are quote-unquote respected governments. But the Rebbe never even tried. The Rebbe was a Russian citizen until he came to America. He had a Russian passport, which made life very difficult for him. The only way to get around going back to Russia was being in school, which is a significant part of the reason that he had to be in Berlin and then in Paris. But he would visit the Frierdiker Rebbe as often as he could. Showed the Polish government at some point didn't let him in. 38 and 39, he couldn't even come for Pesach. The Polish government would not let him visit his shred for Pesach. The Frierdiker Rebbe used to send him matzahs and wine because they didn't let him into Poland for come to his father for Pesach. I can't understand the Nanishkeit Shevat, but that's the Metzias. That's the fact. 38 and 39, the Rebbe and the Rebbetzin had Pesach in Paris because they wouldn't let him into Poland. So he was once visiting the previous Rebbe. And the previous Rebbe calls him in and tells him in Yiddish, considering the dream I had last night, you should shtel mashke, you should put make a Farbrengen. And he tells the Rebbe the following. I was sleeping, previous Rebbe tells I was sleeping, and I saw my father, the Rebbe Rashab. And my father asked me, Favos bestu azay umedik, why are you so sad? As badir in shtub is lichtig banacht. When in your home at night, it's like day, there's light. This is what the previous Rebbe dreamt. He says, I opened my eyes and the moon is shining through the window. That's what he tells the Rebbe. And I knew that my father wasn't talking about the moon. So I got up and I went through the house. And everyone was sleeping. I walked into the Cheder HaSfarim, my library, the Rebbe had his books. And the Rebbe was sitting and learning. Our Rebbe was sitting and learning. So the previous Rebbe understood that when his father said to him, Badin Ishtub is Lichtig Banach, he was referring to the fact that the Rebbe wasn't sleeping. So he tells this to the Rebbe. And then he says to the Rebbe, Kush mich, kiss me. So the Rebbe reaches down to kiss the previous Rebbe's hand. And the Rebbe points at his forehead. Why did she kiss him on the head? So the Rebbe did. The Rebbe writes the story. But it's written so humbly, you think it's talking about somebody else. Now if you wanted to interpret the story, Now, what's the difference between kissing somebody on the hand and kissing somebody on the forehead? When you kiss somebody on the hand, you're kissing what they do, what they give, what they could give, what makes them function. When you kiss somebody on the forehead doesn't represent a particular action. It represents the person. And this is the same idea that I spoke about before, that the face of the person shows you nothing about the person, and it shows you everything about the person. And I'm sure there's deep significance to the fact, first of all, that the Rebbe wanted to kiss the Rebbe's hand. Obviously, he was very uncomfortable kissing his father-in-law any place, let alone on the forehead. But the Rebbe said, no, I want you to kiss me. Kiss me on my metach, on my forehead, on my ponim. There was a Yid in New York whose name was Rabbi Mordechai Mentlik. Rabbi Mentlik. I mean, those of us who are old remember Rabbi Mentlik. Rabbi Mentlik, when we knew him, he moved very slowly, he spoke very slowly, and he came across like as if everything about him was very, very slow. You felt like he's not so sharp. But it was a great cover, because Rabbi Mentlik was so sharp, you have no idea how sharp he was. Rabbi Mentlik was 10 steps ahead of you. When he had a conversation with you and you thought you were fooling him, he was spinning a web, you know. You didn't figure out till much later that you were trapped, you know. He was incredibly sharp. But his chitzonius, he moved very slowly, because the story was that he used to talk so fast. He talked as fast as his brain worked. People couldn't understand what he was saying. So the previous Rebbe told him he should speak very slowly. So he spoke very slowly. But he spoke so slowly, you were under the impression that he was slow. But there was nothing slow about him. He was a really sharp man, really sharp. And Rabbi Yael Khan, the Rebbe's Chayzer, who's now passed away, this is a conversation for a different time. I don't know if people fully appreciate how important the Rabbi Yael is. The Rebbe had so many things to do. And the last thing the Rebbe had to worry about was what he spoke about, his Torah. This one man, this Rabbi Yael Khan, this one boy, he was 20 years old when he showed up, is responsible for so much of the Torah that we have. You take Rabbi Yael out of Lubavitch, I say you can reduce the Rebbe's Torah by a fraction of 10. Mamish. He's the schus that he has and the debt we feel we have to him because of the amount. The Rebbe spoke. Never looked it over. But Rabbi Yael wrote it down, and that's how it stayed for the first 20, 30 years. Much later, the Rebbe got around to editing his sichos. Rabbi Yael was a boy of 20, and he was very intelligent, very smart, very, very sharp. And he was also quite savvy. At Verstanden Political, so he understood sort of personalities and people and egos. He wasn't a flat academic. He understood people very well. He showed up in New York. He came in. He was on the ship when the Frierdiker passed away, and they didn't tell him. They left the port on Sunday Yud Aleph Shevat. The Chassidim in Eretz Yisrael made the decision to let them go. No, they should have taken him off the ship. They let him go to the Rebbe. He arrived a couple of weeks after this Talkus. He actually asked the Rebbe about the possibility of going back because he came to see the previous Rebbe, and the previous Rebbe passed away. So the Rebbe told him, the Rebbe dishvert doch gewusst was wird sein. The previous Rebbe knew what was going to happen, and you need to understand the implications of these words. The Gemara says, and it's in the last Pedic, in Pedic K, in chapter 5 in Basi Lagani, the previous Rebbe brings it, that a person doesn't know Itav Aragov, nobody knows his time. The Gemara says, David HaMelech asked Hashem, Hadiyeni Hashem Kitzi, tell me my time, and Hashem says, nobody knows their time. Nobody knows their time. But the Rebbe says that Rabbeim knew everything. They knew their time also. So the Rebbe said, the Rebbe the Shved, the previous Rebbe knew that this was his time, and he told you to come. So that's a raya that you should stay. So Rabbi Yael stayed. He stayed. And he started to take landscape, to figure out what's going on, you know. There was the Rashad, there was the Rebbe, there were all kinds of people. These people sided with this one. He figured it out pretty quick. Rabbi Yael was very smart. He also was very chassidish. Rabbi Yael Khan was a very humble man, you should know. If you understand how smart he should have had such a big ego when he walked into a room. There was no room for anybody else. He was humble. Rabbi Yael did not take up a lot of space. And he watched Rabbi Mentlik. This Rabbi Mentlik. Rabbi Mentlik was a chassid of the Rebbe before the grave was closed. as soon as the Rebbe passed, the Frierdiker Chassid. But Rabbi Yael understood that Rabbi Mentlik is a smart man. And he wasn't the kind of person who was easily impressed. So we asked Rabbi Mentlik, how did you become a chassid so fast? It takes a little time. How did you become a chassid so fast? And Rabbi Mentlik said, he spoke in Yiddish, if you would have seen how the Rebbe looked at him, you would also. If you had seen how the previous Rebbe would look at our Rebbe when he would walk in, you would also be a chassid. The way the previous Rebbe appreciated the Rebbe was extraordinary. And there's a lot of little details, stories. One of the interesting facts that we know is that in the months prior to the Frierdiker Rebbe's passing, quite a few, I don't know how many, 15, 10, a lot of people who were important to Lubavitch were in the previous Rebbe's room, the Frierdiker Rebbe's cheder, Yechidus, and all of a sudden the previous Rebbe would start talking about the Rebbe. The last few months. And he would talk about the Rebbe in great praise. And they couldn't understand why the Rebbe is doing this. The previous Rebbe never talked about that Rebbe. All of a sudden he's talking about him in such flowering terms. And when the Rebbe passed, they understood that the previous Rebbe was telling them that they should understand that there's really no question about who the Rebbe is supposed to be. And one of the stories that's told about that year, about that period is, I can't promise you that every story is true. I can just promise every story I didn't make up. If it isn't true, I'm just repeating. The stories that I tell, I heard or I read. That Rabbi Kazanovsky was a very important chassid. He was a very, very important chassid in our generation here in America. He did incredible things for the Rabbi. Rabbi Kazanovsky had a dream on Chavdal Tevis, which is about 16 days before Yud Shvat, 2 weeks before Yud Shvat, when the Rebbe officially took the job. And in his dream, he sees a Farbrengen by the Frierdiker Rebbe in the previous Rebbe's apartment on the 2nd floor. And the previous Rebbe in the dream turns to Rabbi Kazanovsky and he says to him, why does everybody look so miserable? Why is everybody so unhappy? So Rabbi Kazanovsky says, why are you so unhappy? Because you left us. You abandoned us. You left us. So the Rebbe says, but I left you my son-in-law, and says the Rebbe's name. So Rabbi Kazanovsky tells the Rebbe, the previous Rebbe, but he keeps on saying, you're still the Rebbe. But you're still the Rebbe. So in the dream, the previous Rebbe turns to our Rebbe, and he says to him from Pachas Shalach, I'll say it in Hebrew and Yiddish, I'll translate it into English. Ma titzak Eloi. Tavos schreist du wegen des Kashrus zu mir. David abnei Yisrael v'Yisrael. Zog chsidis for Yidden, weil sie fordern an Kegen gehen Mashiach. In English he says, why do you keep on speaking about the people being connected to me? Speak chsidis to Chassidim, and they'll go and greet Mashiach. So Kazanovsky got up in the morning the next day. He ran to 770, and he came over to the Rebbe with this Basura. He had this incredible dream. And as was common for the Rebbe, after he finished telling him the whole thing, the Rebbe asked him to say it again. The Rebbe wanted to process it. And when he finished telling the story the second time, the Rebbe said, nah, that's not a real dream. So Kazanovsky says, why, you don't like it? He says, no, because if it was a real dream, I would have had the same dream and I didn't have it. If it would have been a real dream, I would also have the dream. And I didn't have the dream, so you must have been thinking about it. It's one of the many stories. The end of the story is, this is really the truth, the end of the story is, again, I wasn't born yet. None of us, nobody was, I don't think there's anybody here who was certainly not of age to remember this process. It's 75 years. Yud Shvat is 75 years ago. It's a lifetime ago. There was a real concern by the Elder Chassidim whether the Rebbe would accept it. He says, I Farbrengen last night. And I said this, that the Chassidim were really afraid that the Rebbe would not agree to be Rebbe. So next to me was sitting Rabbi Edelman, the son of Rabbi David Edelman. He's a Rebbe in a shul here someplace. So he taps me on the shoulder and he says, my father used to call it revisionist history. He said, it's not true. The day after the Frierdiker passed away, the Rebbe was my Rebbe. He was a shliach already. I was consulting him and he would answer me like a Rebbe. And he was like bothering me that I was telling all of this whole drama. He says, the Rebbe was the Rebbe the minute the Frierdiker passed away. Oh. He says he doesn't care one bit about football. Ariel, your seat's right here. My hat is keeping it warm. Okay, I'll have to hear him. Okay, I'll get to you later. He said to me, Rabbi Elam said to me, my father told me the day the Rebbe passed, he was the Rebbe. So I was trapped, you know what I'm saying? I'm sitting at a Farbrengen, I'm making a whole speech, and this Rabbi Elam is ruining my speech. So I told him what my grandfather told me. My Zaydi Schusterman, Olav Shalom, said to me that he had a Rav from the old country. His name was Rabbi Binyaminson, Rabbi Chmiel Binyaminson. He passed away in 1954. He was an elder chassid. He lived in Canada, and he came to New York for Chayelo that year. And he went to the oil, and he rode a pigeon. He went into the Rebbe, our Rebbe, and he said to the Rebbe, in Yiddish, of course, he says, us old chavre, you know, the old guys who learned to Lubavitch, will figure it out. But what's going to be with the kids? And the Rebbe answered, from the younger habach came on the Shabbat. I never told the young no. I never told the young no. From the first day, I never told the young no. That's what the Rebbe said. But the fact is that on some level, there was a real concern about what was going to be. And the Rebbe accepted the deceased. Was a Farbrengen. I'm sure you were aware that the Farbrengen was scheduled for 8:30. And Bechlal, anybody who knows the Rebbe knew that you could set your clock by the Rebbe. My brother and I, we were children, we would literally look at the clock. The Rebbe walked in 1:30 exactly to Farbrengen. And if it was 1:29 or 1:31, the clock needed a battery change. The Rebbe was so prompt with times, always. Mamish to the minute. In the Lester Paltiel, the last few years, the Rebbe wasn't so precise. But that's when we were growing up, we would literally, was part of the game, was to see if the Rebbe was going to come on time. 10 o'clock was not 10:01, it was not 9:59, it was 10 o'clock exactly. It was remarkable how precise the Rebbe was. The first Farbrengen, the Rebbe showed up 50 minutes late, 50 minutes. It was called for 8:30, showed up 9:20. Where was he? He went to see his mother. And wouldn't you want to be a fly on the wall? To overhear that guy. I don't think that Rebbe went to see his mother and said, Mommy, I'm afraid. I don't think that that's what happened. The Rebbe's mother was living in New York. And I want to say this parenthetically. The Rebbe's mother kept a journal. The Rebbe's mother kept a journal. And they published the journal. It's printed. And from the moment the previous Rebbe passes away until the moment the Rebbe becomes Rebbe, there is zero mention, none, of all the nonsense going on. The politics, the two teams, and all the shtusim. There's zero mention of anything. She talks about her son the way she talked about before. She talks about him after. After the Rebbe becomes Rebbe, she frequently writes in her journal, there's only one person in the world who understands me, but I cannot burden him because he's carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. She says this a few times in her journal, from the year 1950 till 1964. But the Rebbe's mother was here, and her husband, the Rebbe Leivik, had said many years before that the Rebbe was going to be the next Rebbe. So whatever they discussed, it was probably kind of important. The Rebbe made people wait for 50 minutes. The Rebbe Farbrengt. And of course the highlight of the Farbrengen was the Maimer. I'm sure you've heard the stories. There was an old chassid, his name was Sender Nemtzev, Avram Sender Nemtzev. He was the father-in-law of the Rebbe's secretary, we call him Rabbi Dr. Nissen Mendel, Rabbi Nissen Mendel. He was his shver, he was his father-in-law. And he lived also in Manchester, England. He moved to New York in that interim year. When the Rebbe passed, when the Frierdiker passed, he was living in England, and he moved to New York. And he was a senior chassid. And he was a serious man, he was a deep person. And in the middle of the Farbrengen, he got up on the table. The place was packed, he couldn't move. He got up on the table, and he said, the sichas are wonderful. The sichas are wonderful. But the chassidim want a minor. Nimtzachei, the Rebbe should be kind and say a minor chassidus, which he hadn't done. So the Rebbe smiled and told him to sit down. And he opened up, he had in front of him the minor, the Basel guy, the pamphlet called Kuntras Ayin Dalet. The previous Rebbe has pamphlets of chassidus, which were numbered. And it goes up like 112, because the Rebbe kept on printing them after the previous Rebbe passed. The Bossi Legani is Kuntras Ayin pamphlet 74. He opened it up, and he started reading inside. He said that the Maimer that the previous Rebbe came out, For his Histalkos Hilul, he begins Basi Lagan. He started reading inside. And you can hear in the tape, the Rebbe says those words, and you can hear people screaming, stand up, everybody should get up. And when the Rebbe starts saying the Maimed, every sentence he pauses and he breathes heavily. You could see that it's hard for him. But as the Maimed progresses, it gets easier, and the Maimed begins to sort of fall out of him, cascade out. It gets easy and easy for the Rebbe to say the Maimed. And after like 15 minutes, he stopped. The Rebbe stopped twice in the middle of the Maimed. And each time he stopped, they sang the Gunim of 2 Rebbes, because in that first Maimed, the Rebbe mentioned each one of the Rebbes 5 times. From the Alter Rebbe till the Rebbe Rashab. He did not include the Baal Shem Tov and the Maggid the first year, only the second year. He said 2 Toiris from each Rebbe. He told a story from each Rebbe. He mentioned their names. And we sang a niggin from each Rebbe. But as soon as the Rebbe paused, sending them to pop back up on the table, he was very excited. And he said to the assembled that Chassidim have to thank God that they have a Rebbe. And he said a Shechayonu b'Shem L'malchus. He said a Shechayonu with Hashem's name. And everybody said Amen. And the Rebbe smiled and asked him to sit down again. The Rebbe said the Maimed. And of course, after the Maimed, the Rebbe said that famous Sikh, which begins with the words, It's Eretz Chaim Yid. Now listen to me, people. That Sikha was spoken in the tune of a Maimed. It wasn't said like a Sikha, it was said like a Maimed. And he basically said, if anybody thinks, not that you got a Rebbe, you can go back to sleep, you picked the wrong Rebbe. What's going to happen now is everybody is going to be put to work. I'll help you, but you're going to have to work. I was at a Farbrengen last night where somebody related that the Rebbe's brother Label, Yisrael Leib, was living in Israel when the previous Rebbe passed. And he showed up one day in the Lubavitcher Shul, Nachos Ben Yamin, and he says to the Lubavitcher, he says, I know, the next Rebbe is my brother. And I know my brother. If you think you're working hard, you ain't seen nothing yet. My brother's going to make you work like you never worked in your life. And that's exactly what happened. It's exactly. He had to leave Israel. He moved to England before the year was out. In that middle year. And he came to them, Nachum goes, with a few chassidim. And he said, listen, I'm leaving. You have to make sure, you have to promise me you're going to do everything in your power. That my brother should be a Rebbe. My brother has to be a Rebbe. And that's how it was. But what I want to say is, that the Rebbe walked out about 12:30. Farbrengen was about 3 hours. And again, I wasn't born yet. So I obviously don't remember it. But the way it's described is, you had men in their 80s, old people, jumping up and down like school children. They were so happy. The fact that the Rebbe took the job, which had been a concern, was so exciting to Chassidim. They didn't know what to do. It was just, the mood was extraordinary. And it's an interesting thing. It's a very interesting thing. We're sitting here 75 years later. And all of us, none of us are fools. We all understand the situation that we're in. Now you have already a generation and a half. Not children. You have already a generation and a half. The children of children who never saw the Rebbe. Explain it how you wish. The kids struggle. The kids struggle. The kids ask questions. The kids give their teachers a hard time. I know, I'm one of the teachers. But they figure it out. Somehow, they develop not a formal sense of a relationship with the Rebbe, but a personal sense of a relationship with the Rebbe, an intimate sense. Anybody who's a Lubavitcher knows that Lubavitch looks like a big mass of Michiganers running after some rabbi screaming. That's how it looks. But if you're on the inside, you know how individual it is. You know how personal it is. You know the extent to which the Rebbe knows each one, and the Rebbe has a different relationship with each one. Some people, that relationship was developed through long conversations. Some people, that relationship developed through a few words. Some people, that relationship was just the Rebbe's eyes. And some people, that relationship is they never saw him. But his kashrus and chassidus really is very individual. It's very personal. When you're a little kid, you know, you don't really have a choice. You know, if you're born a Lubavitcher. I remember being in yeshiva, and you know, every single Farbrengen was the same topic. Rebbe, 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 Rebbe. And you were not allowed to say it, because if you would say it, they'd lynch you. But you would think it, you know. Well, wait a minute. When did I sign on for this? There's a Rebbe, I'm his chassid. When did that happen? What do you mean? You're Lubavitcher. Yeah, I was born here. And it takes a while for each person to realize that even though the indoctrination, the rearing sort of gives you no space to actually think about this. But at some point you figure out that this is a personal challenge. Every boy and girl, every man and woman, I teach yeshiva bacharim, I teach yeshiva girls, all born after Gimel Tammuz. Their parents were children by Gimel Tammuz. Their parents have, at best, child memories of the Rebbe in many cases. But they all understand, at least many of them, that this is an earnest thing. It's not belonging to a political party. This is not, I'm part of, which team should I say, the Chiefs or the Eagles? Who's winning at the moment, huh?
The Eagles.
The Eagles. So it's not belonging to a team. This is very real. The Rebbe Chassid relationship is personal. And the kids figure it out. So many of them, it's remarkable. And what we know, adults know, and we try to teach this to the kids, and it helps the kids make sense out of this kashrus. When you speak to children who never saw the Rebbe, and they really want to understand how this has anything to do with them, and they're very correct in having that argument, is they realize that Chassidus and his kashrus doesn't begin until you do something. The Rebbe is not going to do anything for us. We're going to do something for the Rebbe. That doesn't seem fair. What do you mean? He's the Rebbe, I'm just one of the guys, why should I do something for him? And the answer is because it's a deep relationship. Deep relationships are about giving. And Chassidim give. And in giving, they get. In giving, they get. I know this from my own self. Everybody's got stories with the Rebbe. Stories, miracle stories, dream stories. Everybody's got stories with the Rebbe. My stories with the Rebbe, personally, are in my teaching. I'll teach a class, and I'll finish the class, and I'll say, I did not give that class. It doesn't happen every day, but it happens from time. This class I didn't give. I don't know where the words came from. In other words, in the things that you do for the Rebbe, you experience the Rebbe's connection to us. And the kids figure that out, and they develop really what is the ultimate definition of a chassid, that they do it with joy, that they're happy to be a Lubavitcher Chassidim. So this is the anniversary, this is the day of his kashrus, and I remember after Gimel Tammuz, 33 and a half years ago, Rav Zalman got out to get up in 770 by the Shloshim, and he spoke like an old Russian chassid. He was an old Russian chassid, and he spoke like an old Russian chassid. He says, "V'ramalam ol gewusst as kashes einen klippet." That's all he said. We always knew that questions are klippet. In other words, you don't need an answer, you need to not ask. Kashes einen klippet. That was, it's Chassidim used to say kashes einen klippet, but that's a very big question. What do you mean kash? I can't ask a question. It takes developing a little emunah to see in retrospect that when you ask a question and you get an answer, the answer doesn't answer the question. Because the question's coming from the heart, the answer's giving to the mind. It's not the same language. You develop his kashrus by getting past that. So l'chaim l'vracha, each one of us should have our kashrus to the Rebbe, and it should be b'simcha. And it's only going to be b'simcha if we deliver. Each person in his own way. All of us have different missions. Everyone has a mission. Whether you go to the convention or you don't go to the convention, if you're a Lubavitcher Chassid, who's not just a descendant of Lubavitcher Chassidim, but is in fact a Chassid of the Rebbe, all of us have a mandate. We all have a job to do, big or little, but they're all very, very important. And in doing this job, we have a relationship with the Rebbe, and the Rebbe is a good Rebbe. He should give us all the brachas, and they should manifest, first of all, in health. In health for us and for our spouses and for all of our children. Physical health, psychological health, spiritual health. And we should use this health to acquire a little wisdom and to live a life that's of a higher value, which is exactly what the Rebbe wants. And as the Rebbe said, we should collectively do our little pieces and bring Mashiach to Kenu. Hello, I'm in charge. Turn it off. I'm in charge. This is my Farbrengen. Sama lecha nafshi, sama lecha nafshi, yeretz tziyah leya yegli, This is the first niggin that Rebbe ever taught. And he taught it the Shabbos after Pesach, Shabbos Kedoshim, Tovshin Yadal, 1954, after the third or fourth year of the Nesias, however you want to count it. And when the Rebbe taught the niggin, he said that it's a niggin from the Alter Rebbe. Now Chassidim knew the Alter Rebbe's nigunim, and there's no such niggin. No one ever heard of Tzamach. Where did it come from? The Rebbe Rashab, the fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe, taught the nigunim of the Alter Rebbe to his chassid. His name was Rebbe Chonon Doi Marazov, Chonya Marazov. Rabbi Marazov's children lived here in New York and in Montreal. They heard all the nigunim from their father. Tzamach's not in the list. So where did Tzamach come from? Where did Tzamach come from? The Rebbe said it's niggun from the Alter Rebbe. So either he heard it from his father, but it's hard to imagine that he would have heard it from his father and they didn't know it in Lubavitch, because his father was a grandson of the Tzemach Tzedek. Now, I don't know this for a fact, but if I was a gambling man, and I'm not, I would bet that this niggin came from Galei. There's two nigun that the Rebbe taught that he took from the under Rebbe, Tzomah L'cha Nafshi and Shamil. There's no way Shamil composed Shamil. Impossible. A Chechen terrorist did not compose Shamil. But the Shamil's niggin. Tzomah, the Rebbe taught Tzomah right in 1954. Now we'll talk a little bit later about Tzomah, but I want to say, I think it's appropriate that we should try to sing as many of the nigunim of the Rebbe. The next niggin the Rebbe taught was Pesach of 1955. It's the niggin V'hisha Omda, which is a good niggin to sing always, especially now. V'hisha Omda V'elav V'yiseinu V'lanu Rebbe taught Nigunim that are very popular. Like how many Nigunim are there? Must be 100. How many Darkachalakenus are there? How many Rachamonadone? How many Atavachatonus? The Rebbe taught songs that there's a lot of other songs with the same words. But somehow the Rebbe's got the best ones. the tune that the Rebbe put in these words, wherever it comes from, they're just good choices. You know, if you want to sing Darkachalakeno, you're going to sing our Darkachal. Why? Because the tune says what the words are saying exactly. You know, Tzamalacha I mean, the tune, you couldn't have a better tune for those words. But all the Negunim of the Rebbe, Atavachatonu, Anim Zmires, the tune and the words, it's a very, very good shidduch. Most of the Negunim that Rebbe taught, he didn't create. He learned them in Europe. He chose very, very good ones to teach us. Every one is special. But Tzamalacha Nafshi is certainly in a class by itself. Tzamalacha Nafshi is the Rebbe's song. When the Rebbe wanted to say something in a melody, he would sing Tzamalacha Nafshi. When I was a kid growing up, at least once a year, possibly more, in the middle of a Farbrengen, all of a sudden, Tzama! No warning. No, everybody get ready. Just boom, the Tzama started. And when the Rebbe said, Tzama! The room shook. Tzama lecha! The Rebbe said, Tzama! You can hear so much Tzama in the Rebbe's, there's videos of the Rebbe singing Tzama. You have to understand, there's no warning. It wasn't like the kids had ready to get married, had time to prepare themselves. The Tzama! The thirst. And it's a fascinating thing, you know, if we would be people who are, there's two kinds of people, as I'm sure you know. There's people who live life, and people who study other people's lives, you understand? Now, the people who study other people's lives, they think they're very, very important. So they say, "Rit stark." But the meiste of us is Rachmanis. You're supposed to live, not study other people's lives. So if we would study the Rebbe, and of course we're smart enough not to, the Rebbe is Tzamalacha Nafshi. You're talking about a man, a Rebbe, who every breath of his was simcha. Every breath. The Rebbe is full of joy, and he expects every chassid. He wants every chassid to be in the mind of the matter of simcha. But what the Rebbe wanted to speak in a melody, the melody that he spoke is very, very far from joyous. It's almost a bitter thing in Tzamalacha Nafshi. I saw once in the Rishima. So who won? We can't Farbrengen, so have noch 10. Who won? But they know already who won. We'll know soon. We'll know soon. Listen. We'll find out when the room fills up at the visit. Wait. They didn't post it on COL yet. Okay, noch ein paar Minuten. A minute. The Rebbe wanted every chassid to be besimcha. The Rebbe himself is a yid who was always besimcha. I know for a fact a yidl, Nish Kalabavitcher, who knew the Rebbe. He once walked into the Rebbe's room in the 1970s. He said to the Rebbe, "Was macht der Lubavitcher Rebbe?" Which is basically, "How you doing, Rebbe?" Which is not exactly respectful, but he had that relationship with the Rebbe, and without hesitating, the Rebbe answers him, "Ich bin tamid besimcha." I'm always joyous. I saw a Rishima. I have someplace in my house, all kinds of papers that I collected, and I can't find it. I've looked for it many times. I can't find it, but I didn't make it up. I'm just not smart enough to invent this. That a Yid walked into the Rebbe in the early 70s. It's more than 50 years ago. This Jew was a survivor. Had come from the old country, and the old country was not a little different than America. It was a whole different wavelength. The Yerushalayim, the Chassidus, the Torah, everything was, by American standards, it was Pashat holy. Rabbi Karski once said, Rosh Hashiva, said once in a speech, he said that Rosh Hashivas in America, in Poland, they would have been launderers. They would have taken care of the mikveh, the level of learning. Yeah? So he came into the Rebbe, he was a Fataytish Yid, he was a European Jew. And he says to the Rebbe that he can't find a place in America. It's 25 years, 27 years after the war. It's 1972, 73. He says to the Rebbe, I can't deal with this. It's a whole new religion. And And he doesn't find a place for himself. He's not happy. He has no camaraderie. Doesn't have anybody to talk to. It's a whole new world. And the Rebbe says to him in Yiddish, and I have to say the Yiddish because I think it's so precious. Was trachst du? Ich wollt nicht gewollt sein in Deide shel Rabbi Yechane ben Zakkai. Wenn Teretz der gewalget in der Gassen, aber der Rebbe hat mir gelegt in dem Dor, weil ich tan da avoide von dem Dor, und ich es tan besimcha. The Rebbe says, you don't think I would prefer to be born of the generation of Yechane ben Zakkai. Now you have to understand there's a precise choice here. Rabbi Yechane ben Zakkai went through the Holocaust. Rabbi Yechane ben Zakkai is on that list of Gedolei Yisrael that says, like it says in Eicha, it says in Lamentation, it says in Eicha, Ani ha-gevero oni b'shever bas ami. I am the gever. The word gever is used in Chassidus for about tshuva, someone who heals. Ani ha-gevero oni. I am the gever who saw the impoverishment b'shever bas ami, when my nation was broken. Yirmiyah Novi wrote those words about himself. Yirmiyah Jeremiah wrote Lamentations. He wrote, Ani ha-gever, I am the person who witnessed the destruction of the Jewish people. The Navi says, Hashem said to Yirmiyah, you're going to see hell. I'm giving you one reprieve. They're not going to kill you. Thank you very much. This was the only thing. David told me, you're going to survive it all. You're going to be able to say witness. Rabbi Yechane ben Zakkai was the same thing. He witnessed Churban Bayis Sheni. And the Rebbe witnessed the Churban that is in recent times. So his choice of comparisons is precise. He didn't say, I would like to be in time of Hillel. He said Rabbi Yechane ben Zakkai. Because there's a lot of comparison between himself and Rabbi Yechane ben Zakkai. But when Rabbi Yechane ben Zakkai was presiding over the Sanhedrin, the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, but the yeshiva, Yavne, was intact. So the Rebbe says to him, you don't think I would prefer to be in the times of Yechane ben Zakkai when Torah was rolling in the streets? But God Almighty, it's a translation in English. You don't think I wouldn't prefer to be in the generation of Yechane ben Zakkai when Torah was rolling in the streets? But God Almighty put me in this time. I'm going to do the work that I need to do here, and I'm going to do it with joy. Because the way the Eibishter operates is he doesn't exactly ask us what we want. He puts us in a situation, and we can either adapt to the situation or spend our lives being victims, complaining. And the Rebbe says, I'm not going to be a victim. I may not like it, but this is what I got to do, and this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to tell you a Lashon Hara. I think I said it last time I was here, so forgive me for repeating myself. But I'm not going to say any names. There was a boy who lived in 770. This goes back my father's generation. He went through the Holocaust as a child. He didn't have a father. He was a child of the Holocaust. I don't know if he's in Russia. He wasn't in Poland. He wasn't necessarily in the camps, but he lost his father. And he came to America. He was incredibly diligent. He was a moidendik amasmid. And he became Mamish Agon. He's a genius, like, he's a scholar of Torah for real, not in the American version. He's truly a God. And the Rebbe held him like a son. The Rebbe loved him like a son, Mamish. When he published his first volume of Chodesh Torah, the Rebbe paid for it. The Rebbe paid for it. He had no money. He was a bacher. And the Rebbe wrote him a long letter, which is published at the beginning of his book, which begins with the words that the Rabbeim of Chabad would not write haskamas, would not write approbations on Sfarim. But then the Rebbe continues and says, but I'm a witness that you sat and learned Torah day and night. He would sit in 7, he wouldn't go home till the Rebbe went home. So if the Rebbe sat in 7 till 6 in the morning, he would sit and learn. They would walk out of his room, and he was sitting directly opposite the Rebbe in the Zal. The Rebbe would see him, and the Rebbe would leave, and then he'd go home to sleep. If he come back and learn. He was a moidendik amasmid. And the Rebbe wrote such a beautiful letter when he published his first sefer. There was a family of a Tomim from Lubavitch who had passed away years earlier. This man was a Gaon, a great scholar. And in Mistame, he was a bigger Talmud Chacham than this Bachadol in 770 that the Rebbe wrote the Haskama for him. And they published their father's Chedushei Torah. And they asked the Rebbe to write a Haskama, an approbation. And the Rebbe said that it's not the meaning of the Rabbeim to write Haskamas. So they said to him, what about him? What about him? This 21-year-old Bechel, his book you're approving, and the book of one of the great sages of Taim Chatmimim you can't approve. I don't know exactly what the wording was, but basically the Rebbe said, this is none of your business. These are my guys. Your father was, this is meine Kinderlach. And if you're bisboinen in it, if you think about it, I'm a little young to remember this, but I do remember the tail end of it. You must understand, the Hasidim who came from Russia, the old-timers, the generation who went to Lubavitch, had no use for us. American Lubavitch Hasidim, we were hyper, we were emotional, we were dumb. Everything we did was so impulsive. They couldn't value us. American Hasidim, the Rebbe's Hasidim, who went on, they realized they could not value us. Because they were raised in a different generation. Lubavitch really was a special place. I mean, the city of Lubavitch, the yeshiva, the level of learning, the level of fear of God, and the level of depth and integrity and modesty, quiescence. And here we were, American boys and girls, who were so American, empty and showy, or showy and empty, whatever word you want to say it. They had no use for us. And they couldn't value us. But the Rebbe didn't have a problem. Now I would imagine that if the Lubavitcher Bochanim from Taim Chatmimim were, so to speak, head and shoulders above us, Mistama the Rebbe was also head and shoulders above us, huh? You think? The Rebbe himself, was for a kesher amir gehat mit the Rebbe, we had nothing in common with the Rebbe. But the Rebbe, we were the Rebbe's children. And the Rebbe's philosophy was, what God gave me is what I have, and these are my people. End of story. You know, Rabbi Hurston just passed. Rabbi Moshe Hurston passed a few weeks ago. And the real truth of the matter is that these are people that are irreplaceable. The Rebbe's first shluchim, there are generals. They really are generals. They were chassidim. I mean, compared to us, they were really great chassidim who made great sacrifices. You know, guys go on shlichus today, and in 3 years they build a building. When those guys went on shlichus, they waited 30 years to build a building. Everything was so much more difficult, and they worked for the Rebbe. The Rebbe was holding them by the hand and developing the work as the Rebbe wished it to be. But it was very, very hard for them, and they were very dedicated. The Rebbe once told Rabbi Hurston, I'm not the Maharal Miprag. I can't create people. I work with what I got. Finished. If the Eibishter wanted, he could have given me chassidim with great minds and great hearts who are very mature, who have no paranoia, who are not jealous, who are self-assured, so they're afraid someone's going to steal their territory. What did the Rebbe give? The Eibishter give him? Whatever he decided. And the Rebbe said, this is what I got, and this is what I'm going to work with, and these are meine Kinderlach. And this story, where the Rebbe writes Haskama for a boy who was in Rebbe's Talmud, and he wouldn't write Haskama for a man who lived in Lubavitch. Why? I'm sure that person's book was more precise in Lomdis. But this is the Rebbe's. This is the Rebbe. We are the Rebbe's children. And the next generation is even more so. And the next generation, our children that are now growing up, the Rebbe's connection to us isn't based on our worthiness. It's based on the fact that we are the Rebbe's. What God gave him. The Eibishter gave the Rebbe us. You know, it actually says in the Sichos, I used to always deny it, but then I saw it with my own eyes. It says in the Sichos that the Rebbe Rashab handpicked who would learn in Taim Chatmimim. And by extension, you have to say the Rebbe handpicked who was going to be a Lubavitcher. I have 3 brothers, they're all shluchim. And one of my brothers tells me, you know, you go to a community and you're a mekad of people, and a certain percentage become frum. And then they leave, and then they become Esha Torah. It's good they invite you to the wedding, give you a bracha under the chuppah, and it hurts. It hurts. You put so much into a person, and then they don't like you. You're not religious enough for them. You're not learned enough. Whatever the shaykh says. And he said to me, the first time it happened, it was terrible. He said, I woke up one day and I decided, not everybody merits to be a chassid of the Rebbe. Finished. He's not better than me. He doesn't have this chus. He doesn't have this chus. We are connected to the Rebbe, and it's a great chus. It really is. We're not here because we're worthy. We're not here because we're so smart. It just worked out. The Eibusher geholfen, God Almighty arranged. As the lawyers come and it should work out that we should be in these Daled Amis. Baruch Hashem, Gleib Hashem is Baruch. And the Rebbe loves every Jew. I mean, there's no doubt. Everybody knows that Rebbe's Avos Yisrael is, it borders on the obscene, you know. Rebbe's Avos Yisrael. I heard from non-Chabad people who talk about how much the Rebbe couldn't see a bad Jew. Bechlal didn't exist. Always had a positive spin. Always had a way of seeing a Yid in a positive light. And some people say that Rebbe's love for Jews was so extreme that you could ask questions whether it's halachically allowed. You know, the Rebbe, you know the story, yeah? Someone once came to the previous Rebbe and said to him, you know, there's a section in Shulchan Aruch, there's actually a section in Shulchan Aruch about Jews that you're supposed to hate. So some people have very long lists of those kinds of Jews, you know what I'm saying? They're very frum. The Rebbe, if Rebbe's list is blank, there's not one Jew on the list. Excuse me, sir, there are a lot of qualified candidates, especially 80 years ago, there were more candidates then than now. So the previous Rebbe said the Shulchan Aruch is very big. It has 4 sections. The laws of Sinas Yisrael are the last simonim in the last of the 4 sections of the Shulchan Aruch. I haven't gotten there yet. I'm working my way through the Shulchan. I haven't gotten yet to the idea of mitzvah l'snois. If you learn Tanya chapter 32, the Alter Rebbe addresses it from a point of view of Allah. He said, listen, the Jew you're supposed to hate, you're also supposed to love. And the Jew you're supposed to hate and love, you're supposed to feel bad for him. So it becomes, like it says in Tanya, L'Yaakov asher podes Avraham. You have Yaakov, which is Rachamim, compassion. And Avraham, which is Ahava. So they're on one side, and the opposite is Yitzchak. Yitzchak is Gevura. Gevura, when it becomes negative, is the opposite of love. So the Alter Rebbe says you're supposed to love the guy. You're supposed to hate the guy. You're supposed to feel bad for the guy. So it becomes 2 against 1. So in your heart, the love and the compassion overrules the hate, even those Yidden that you're supposed to hate. And the Rebbe couldn't find the Jew worth hating. Every Jew was worthy of love. Every Yid was worth Ava. I told the story Shabbos. I'm going to say it with the name. It's my aunt. She lived in Gan Eden. You know her, if you've read her books, as Miriam Neville. She's my father's sister. Miriam Neville is Miriam Paltiel. She didn't have an easy life. She went through Alam Adur Gehenim. She was in Moscow when the Germans attacked Moscow. My father says he remembers rockets hitting the building he lived in. You know, ordnances hitting the building. Then they escaped to Siberia, where they, Baruch Hashem, had starvation for 3 years. My grandfather chose Siberia over Asia. He figures you can starve here, but in Siberia there's no bugs. There's no bacteria, it's too cold. So the people didn't die from disease, and it was true. Then he came back to Moscow. Her mother died when she was a 6-year-old. I mean, there's not a tzaddik she didn't experience. Anyway, she raised a beautiful family. Amazing. Amazing how these people had such brachas. And the Rebbe held them by the hand. Without the Rebbe, these people would have been nothing. The Rebbe held my father, my aunt, my uncle, their whole generation. More than a father. My aunt once told me she was a 60-year-old. And the Rebbe saw her on the street and walked up to her and started asking her about how high school was doing. 10 minutes about what's going on in her life. That kind of concern for the individual, it was so, they felt how much the Rebbe created that generation. Wounded people. Anyway, her life wasn't easy. When things would get really unbearable, she lived in Worcester. She'd get on a bus by herself. She'd go Greyhound, she'd come to 770. She'd go into the Rebbe that night. In those years, you could do it. She'd unload and she'd go home. She'd take a Pesach, clean out the system, and then she could room for more garbage. Like you have a garbage bag, you got to empty the bag, you put more in. So she came once to the Rebbe, and she said whatever she had to say, and the Rebbe listened to her. And when she finished, the Rebbe said to her, "Kol ma'ad," I heard it from her personally. "Kol ma'ad ovid rachmanu l'tav ovid," which means in English, everything Hashem does turns out for the best. It doesn't mean it is the best. That's gamzu l'toiv. Gamzu means it's good now. The tavav means it's going to be good later. The Rebbe has siches and Rebbe Kiva and Nachamish Gamzu. It's 2 different levels. And her children told me, she didn't tell this to me, that the Rebbe translated it for her in Yiddish. Everything, alles was der Rebbe tut, los sich arois zu Gutens. Whatever Hashem does will turn out in the end. That's how she translated it for good. So she tells me, without any ability to control her lips, she heard herself say, wer sagt? Who says? It was so disrespectful. It was mamish. It was completely impulsive. It was a knee-jerk reaction. There was no awareness. The word just plopped out of her mouth. Who says? Wer sagt? And the Rebbe gave her one of those smiles that we've seen 100 times and said, Ich sag. I say. I reassure you, I say. So I told the story. I've been talking all weekend. I told it Shabbos. So it was not a religious crowd. It was from crowd. It was a Beis Chabad. So the people said to me, he wasn't insulted. What a chutzpah. A young girl tells the Rebbe, who says? Who says? Maybe it's rotten. Who says? And he said, so I tried to explain to the people. It was kind of hard, for the Rebbe to take us personally. Because he was, he knew exactly. The Rebbe understands the nisyonos that we have. The real and the imaginary, the worst tests that we have are imaginary. Because he can't fix an imaginary problem. It isn't there. A real problem you can solve. But a problem that's in your head, that you concocted, that you developed, that you brewed, it's very difficult to deal with the stuff that's often imagined. She didn't hurt his feelings, you understand? She didn't upset him. And this is, the Rebbe has his relationship with us. And the Rebbe has a lot of patience, but he also has no patience at all. And the whole philosophy of the Rebbe, the whole way of thinking of the Rebbe is, and everybody knows this. Do me a favor. Get out of your head and just do something. You can't get out of your head and fix your head. That's very difficult to do. But if you get out of your head and you do something, you're not saying to your head, okay, I'm fixing it. You're saying to your head, leave my head alone. My head's the problem, but I can do good. And the more we do, the more the head heals. The Mishagasin, especially the imagined ones, there are real ones. The imagined ones heal themselves, they get busy with good. Which of course explains why there was never a Rebbe who made a greater priority out of Lo Hamedrash Ikir Ela Hamaisa, or as the Rebbe would misquote the Mishnah 1,000 times. Hamaisa Hu Ikir, there's no such expression. Hamaisa Hu Ikir is the Rebbe's expression. The Mishnah says, Lo Hamedrash Ikir Ela Hamaisa. The Medrash, which means the study and the interpretation. The word Medrash actually means interpretation. Lo Hamedrash Ikir, the study and the interpretation is not what's important. Ela Hamaisa, the most important thing is what we do with it. So the Rebbe created this phrase, Hamaisa Hu Ha'ikir. The action is the main thing. And the action heals. The action heals. It gets us past the shtussim. It gets past the nonsense. It gets us past ourselves. Anyway, but I want to make my point. But when the Rebbe wanted to say something that truly spoke what was in his heart, he said, Samalach Hanafshi. In other words, it's nicht as a geschmack. Here's this Rebbe who preaches positivity and simcha. And he doesn't only preach it, he practices it. The Rebbe, people say that the Rebbe used to say. I never heard it from the Rebbe, but my teachers told me that the Rebbe said, by nature, I'm an introvert. By nature, I'm a book person. I'm melancholy. I'm not effervescent. The Rebbe by nature is an introvert. And introverts and academics tend to be a little bit more heavy. That's the Rebbe's nature. And the Rebbe said, I completely reconfigured myself. I recreated myself to be besimcha all the time, to be joyous all the time, because this is what's needed now. And when you got to do what you got to do, whether you like it or not, whether it's comfortable or not, whether it's natural or not, the Rebbe is the epitome of simcha. But when he wanted to say what he was thinking, he said, Samalach Hanash. And if you want to interpret it on a personal level, It's not so geschmack. It's not easy. It's not easy being where the Rebbe is. You know the stories. Before the previous Rebbe passed away, the Rebbe got together a bunch of Chassidim. And he told the Chassidim that Lubavitch is suffering from a lack of resources, financial resources. And the problem is that we're dependent on outsiders, on philanthropists who are not Lubavitchers, they're not frum. So it gets very sticky. Let's organize a group of 10 men, the Rebbe said. We'll go into the previous Rebbe and we'll ask the previous Rebbe that for the sake of the previous Rebbe, Lubavitch should have its own Gvirim. Lubavitch should become financially independent. There should be sufficient resources in Chabad itself with the Rebbe not to have some guy and give him a plaque and give him COVID and he's doing you a whole favor. The Rebbe should have the money he needs for the work he needs to do. The Rebbe organized it. But before they could go into the previous Rebbe, he passed. So the Chevra decided, it was the Rebbe's idea, right? So they went into the Rebbe. And they said, we have this idea. We heard this from a guy named Amash, that means you yesterday, that Lubavitch needs its own Gvirim. So we came to request that the Rebbe should give a bracha, that Lubavitch should be financially independent, that in Anash, amongst Lubavitch Chassidim, there should be the kind of resources, financial resources, that the Rebbe is not going to be dependent on outsiders. So they told the Rebbe's own words back to the Rebbe. And the Rebbe said, now I'm wearing different spectacles. I see things differently, and it ain't that simple. It's not so simple. Another story in the same vein. The Rebbe visited France in 1947 to get his mother. He spent 3 months there. And by that point, Lubavitch Chassidim were trickling into Paris. Remember, after the war, they had to escape Russia, 46. And they ended up at the DP camps in Germany and in Austria. And slowly but surely, they were liquidating these camps. They came to Paris, and they waited for countries to allow them to emigrate to. America, Canada, Australia, of course, Israel, and so on. So the Rebbe comes to Paris, and there were enough Lubavitch Chassidim. They weren't all there by any means. My father was not there. But there were enough Lubavitch Chassidim in Paris at the time. And the Rebbe says to a number of Lubavitch Chassidim, why don't you travel to New York? Why don't you come to the Rebbe? So they say to our Rebbe, we asked the previous Rebbe and he's not letting us come. We asked the previous Rebbe about coming to New York and he's not letting us come. So the Rebbe said, you got it all wrong. Don't ask. Tell him you're coming and ask for a bracha. The Rebbe hates it. Chassidim, instead of asking the Frierdiker Rebbe what to do, they should let him know they're coming and ask for a bracha. So a bunch of Chavre did it. And they had brachas, they came to the Bechol Tainabam, a few others. Then the Rebbe passes away. Our Rebbe becomes the Rebbe. So a bunch of people sent it to the Rebbe notices, we're coming to New York, we're asking for a bracha, and they get back an answer, excuse me, sir, you have to ask. So they told the Rebbe, it was your idea. It was your idea. He said, yeah, it's my idea then. It's not my idea now. It's a whole other situation. It's an ishgishmak. You know, it's very good when somebody else. The Rebbe Rashab was a little boy. He was so young, he couldn't even speak. And they used to say, I don't want to be a yebbe when I grow up. Let somebody else be the yebbe. Chassidim zayin asacha, yebbe is it. There's many chassidim who want, yebbes are lonely. But that's how it is. The ones who don't want the job end up with it. That's how it works. But the Rebbe would sing tzama. The Rebbe would say tzama l'chanafshi, meaning, as much as the Rebbe was the Rebbe of our generation, and the Rebbe of our generation means everything had to be done b'simcha. The Rebbe said, when you live in America, you have to be American. You have to make demonstrations, you have to make parades, you have to be positive. I mean, all American sales techniques the Rebbe used. Why? He's quoted the Chazal, Azles, Bekarte, Halach Benimus. You come to a civilization, you adopt its custom. And the Rebbe very much felt that in America we should be Chassidim the way Americans are Americans, and the strengths and weaknesses of our culture. But the tzama was still there. The tzama, the longing, the thirst. The Rebbe would say tzama l'chanafshi. And the Rebbe is saying, how many times did the Rebbe Tzam Malacha Nafshi? How many times did I hear it? Maybe 100 times, maybe more. The Rebbe sang Tzam Malacha Nafshi. When the Rebbe wanted to say something with a melody that was personal to him, he would say Tzama. 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 In other words, on a simple level, it hurts. It's tutvei. Anyway, you have to say L'chaim and be mafsik. Anyway, L'chaim and L'chaim. Like I said, I think we should sing the Nigunim that the Rebbe taught.
What about Anim Zmiros?
Anim Kadud and L'chaim and L'chaim. You got it. L'chaim, everybody. L'chaim and L'chaim. Shadi Yedish Healthy simchas.
Revealed.
Amen. But you see, but there's another side to this coin. And I think the other side to this coin is a very important part of this. David HaMelech, King David said, David HaMelech said, King David, why did he say it? Because he was kicked out of Israel. He was made to leave. The king was his own father-in-law, and his father-in-law Poshet wanted him dead. Because Shaul was paranoid. Now's not the time to have this conversation. But of all the personalities in Tanakh, you have to feel bad for Shaul HaMelech. He got such a raw deal. His story is not a reflection of who he is. His story is a reflection of the fact that he wasn't David. He was given a job that was never meant for him, that he didn't want, and then he was punished for it. Shaul HaMelech was a very, very big time. It says in the Novi, Ben Shono Achas Shaul B'Moche. The Gemara says, Shaul HaMelech became a king at the age of 1 year. Says the Gemara, do me a favor, 1 year. And the Gemara says he was as pure in the area of Chet as a 1-year-old. Shaul HaMelech. And then the story of his life is so tragic. He tried to kill David, his own son-in-law and successor. So David ran away. And he went outside of Israel, to Gas, whatever. He went to Gaza. I hate to say it. He went to Gaza, which was then ruled by the Plishtim. And he was bemid by Yehuda, the desert in the Negev, the south of Israel. And he sings, Tzamalocha nafshi, kamalocha besari, be'edet siva ivli moyim. Tzamalocha nafshi, my soul thirsts. Kamalocha besari, my body aches. I'm in pain, psychologically, spiritually, physically. Because be'eretz tziv, I've been disposed to a place where there's no life, there's no water, there's no life. And of course, he didn't only mean the fact that physically the desert has no water. He meant that there was no Torah, there was no Lakus, there was no Beis HaMikdash, there was no nothing. And then he says, Kei b'kodesh chazisicha. It's true that b'kodesh, when I was in the holy places, wherever the holy places were, Shiloi and Noiv and Givei. So when I went to holy places, I experienced the Lakus, at least in the Madrega of Chizoyin, if not in the Madrega of the Iya. Chizoyin is a little bit of a lower level. Chizoyin means to see in Aramaic. The Iya means to see in Hebrew. He doesn't say Kain b'kodesh ri'i sicha. He says Kain b'kodesh chazi sicha. It's a little bit of a lower level. But he says when I was in better places, in better times, I was able to experience you. Lidas uschoch v'dacha. Now I'm b'midbar Yehuda. This is what David HaMelech laments. So on these psukim, there's a Baal Shem Tov, a very important Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov changes one word. But in changing one word, he changes the entire scenario. And it really gives us an entirely different perspective on the Rebbe is saying, Tzama L'cha Nafshi. When the Rebbe wanted to speak in a melody, he said, Tzama L'cha Nafshi. And there's a part of me that believes that he said Tzama because it hurt. But there's another spin. The Baal Shem Tov changed one word. Tzama L'cha Nafshi, Kama L'cha Besari, Be'eretz Yivayif B'liboyim. And instead of the word Kain b'kodesh, he said Halavai b'kodesh. Which changes the meaning of the pasuk Menakatza L'katza. You mind? Give me the mashke. Instead of Tzama Kain b'kodesh means Kain, it's true. Kain in Hebrew is like Hain. Hain means yes. Hain, thank you. Hain, it's true. B'kodesh, when I was in holiness, Chazisich, I saw you. So the Baal Shem Tov takes out the Kain and puts in Halavai. I wish that I was in Yerushalayim, when I was in Shiloh, when I was in Noiv, when I was in Givon, when I was in the Beis HaMikdash. The batteries just died. Hello, testing, 1, 2, 3. Oh, it's 11 o'clock.
Now they're for bringing.
Huh?
Now they're for bringing.
It's because of the battery or because of 11 o'clock?
I'll get a charger for it.
Okay. He says, I wish, instead of saying, that when I was closer to you, I knew you, he completely spins it around. It doesn't work?
This works, that needs to be charged.
Oh, that needs to be charged.
The receiver.
Listen. Nosson Shalom Aleich.
Nosson, Zog L'chaim, Nosson.
Alta Chavena from a million years ago. Okay, jung. Was Shem sagt? Ich Shem sich nicht. Nosson, ich Shem sich nicht. Shalom Aleichem. What is your name? Shlomi? And your last name? Chaim. Hollander?
Far Chabad.
Far Chabad.
The Rebbe told him he's a Kohen.
Schneerse. That's nice to see you. You know, your mother used to come to my classes. The classes stopped. We do it again on Sunday. Maybe she doesn't even know. But we have our classes now. 7. Tell your mother that every Sunday of Tanya Nayem Yekti. Around 11. That's the song.
Testing.
Wait 1 second. You hear? So the Baal Shem Tov changes one word.
Here.
Thank you. The Baal Shem Tov changes one word. Instead of saying Cain, it's true. B'kodesh chazisicha, when I was in holiness, I saw you. He says, Halavai, I wish that when I was in holiness, I would see you like I see you now. This changes the meaning of the pasuk completely. How? David HaMelech is far from God. King David is far from the Eibishter. He finds himself in, He finds himself, the battery died, okay. He finds himself in a circumstance where he cannot experience Gilul Lakus. Hashem is hiding from him. And he says, in this circumstance, where Hashem is hiding from me, where I cannot see him, I'm closer to him than I was when I could see him. Halavai b'kodesh, I wish that when I was closer to him and I actually experienced him, I would feel about him the way I feel now that I don't have him. Baal Shem Tov turns the psukim around. David HaMelech is thirsting for God who's hiding from him. And David HaMelech concedes, my desire for the God who I don't see is more of God than the God I used to see. Wanting the Eibishter and not having him actually makes me closer to him than when I had him. Halavai ba'kodesh. I wish when I was intimate with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when I lived in a holy world, in a pure world, in a good world, and I felt so close to him, I wish my closeness to him at that time was as genuine as what I have now that I don't have him. And you have to think about that in terms of the Rebbe. You have to think about that in terms of the Rebbe. You have to think about that in terms of the Rebbe. What's that in terms of the Rebbe? And this is a real, I think it's a truth. I think it's an undeniable truth.
That's what you started, Blessed Evangel, in the beginning.
Yeah, that's right. And the word panim. You look at the face of God and you see a mask, and in fact you're seeing him himself. You're not seeing an interpretation, you're not seeing a level, you're not seeing a revelation, you're seeing him himself. Exactly. The Rebbe is Metzias, Rabbi Yossi is the Bali Tshuva. There's no question about it. And the truth is, if you want to be honest, as far as the Rebbe is concerned, the so-called FFBs, those people who are messed up because they were never born Lubavitch, we're all Bali Tshuva. We're a generation of Bali Tshuva. And what's about Tshuva? What's about Tshuva? What's about Tshuva? What's about Tshuva? In Chassidus. What's about Tshuva? About Tshuva is a person whose motivation does not become because he desires God. About Tshuva is a person whose motivation is because he wants to go away from where he is. Where he is no good. And David HaMelech says that when you're running to God, the running has a limit. But when you're running from the emptiness of not having God, that running has no limit. I think we could all, there's no question that the Rebbe is Metzias is the Bailei Tshuva. I was born in 1965. I grew up in the 70s. My home, my childhood home, all the Bailei Tshuva came through our home. I saw them, I knew them all, I saw them all. The Rebbe celebrated the Bailei Tshuva. The Bailei Tshuva, the Rebbe's children. You know, a woman once told the Rebbe that she's a Bailei Tshuva. So she's missing out on what they call yesh, being traditional, chassid ben chassid. So the Rebbe said to her, I have two kinds of chassidim. The chassidim that I inherited from my father-in-law, and the chassidim that are my own. And the chassidim that are my own are the Bailei Tshuva. And what makes a Baal Tshuva is not because he wasn't born religious. What makes a Baal Tshuva is tzama l'chanafshi. What makes a Baal Tshuva is thirst, is want. The guys who have is satisfied. It says in Chassidus, the highest level, the whole neshama, the highest madrega in the neshama is called tainuk. It's translated in English as delight, whatever delight means. It's considered higher than Ratz. Kabbalistically, in Maimori Chassidus, Samach Vav, you have Lech Lecha, Neach and Lech Lecha, where the Rebbe Rashab explores at great length, on many levels, the will of the nefesh, the urgent will of the nefesh, and the delight of the nefesh, the pleasure of the nefesh. And the Rebbe Rashab actually says, there's no level the neshama higher than pleasure. But pleasure is anticlimactic. Why? Because the worst thing that can happen to a person is to get what they want. The want is always truer than the have. It's a fact. And that's the taich tzama l'chanafshi. I don't know what the Rebbe was thinking. I think a lot of people, especially sociologists, these are people who, like I said, instead of living life, study other people's lives. You don't want to be an expert. Let somebody else study you and tell you that you're a monkey and that you're a mishugin and a drekap. You're living your life. Their whole life is defined by giving an opinion on you. It's nishka leben. It's really sad. It's sad that people who call themselves smart, their whole life is studying other people's lives. They never take a look in the mirror. They're busy. I can't live because I'm an expert. I can't get married. I can't have a family. I have to study the people who do, from the academics, from the kluge mensch. You be a dumb idiot, get married and have kids and let them study you and decide that you have this problem and that problem and you're stuck in this way, stuck in the other way, but at least you're alive. The experts who are studying you, let them fill all the spots. You don't be a student of life, just live it. And let them tell you 101 ways that you're messed up and the 101 ways something wrong with you. Thank you for your professional opinion. I will either take it or leave it, but I'm going to continue living. You continue your study. If people would study the Rebbe, they would say perhaps that when the Rebbe said summer, he was saying summer because of the feeling of emptiness that the Rebbe felt, considering the world from which the Rebbe came. I cannot say that there's no part of summer that the Rebbe said, I remember a different world. It's gone. It's gone. I don't know if you know this, but a man made a book with photographs, and he called it The Vanishing World, or The Vanished World. A Jew had been in Poland in the 30s. He took pictures. If I'm saying the name of the book incorrectly, please correct me, but it's a known book. He made a book of pictures, which was, he went to Europe before the war. He took pictures, and after the Holocaust, he published a book called The Vanished World. Think of The Vanished World. Huh? Yeah. So he's describing a world that's no more. And he sent a copy of this book to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe wrote him a letter. And then the Rebbe wrote to him, "Excuse me, sir, that world has not yet vanished. It's alive and well," number one. And number two, in many ways, the world that's today is better than that world. The Rebbe said that world has not disappeared. If there's nowhere to look, you'll find the same world. And in many ways, it's better than it was. So I'm not going to say that when the Rebbe said, Sama l'cha nafshi, there's no part of it where the Rebbe is saying, it would have been nice if there was no Holocaust, and there was no Tsarist Russian Revolution, and Tevchat Tmimim was in full bloom, and there was another generation of Tmimim who were serving the Eibishter like they did in Lubavitch. I want to tell you a Lashon Hara. But I'm not going to say any names, so I won't be able any Avedis.
It's not Lashon Hara.
It's a Lashon Hara. Believe me, it's a Lashon Hara.
You gotta say the name.
You're interested in the name because it's going to make you a bigger chassid or a bigger yed.
Don't tell me you're gonna say Lashon Hara and then not say the name.
I'm going to say the Lashon Hara without the name. And Ariel, your seat is right. If you want to be a chitik, you got to sit next to me and give you a zitz. Across the table, it doesn't work. Halya, listen. The Rebbe sent a shliach to England in 1959. His name was Rabbi Nachman Sudak. Rabbi Nachman Sudak was born in Russia, probably in 1934. Went through hell. Literally, he went through the Holocaust. Starvation, death. During the Holocaust, people died like people ate breakfast. Death was all around them. Mamish, Mav is the psukim that describe in Eicha what it means. Death was just every day. Some people survived, some people died. As the Chazal say, in a time of a dever, of a magefa, the healthiest people died, the sick people survived. The world is out of control. That was his upbringing. That was his youth. That was his adolescence. He came out of Russia. He was a teenager. Went to Israel. He came to the Rebbe. But he had every reason to be a mental case. His yeshiva experience was so compromised because he was living a life. And the Rebbe sent him on shlichus to London. In London, there was an unusually large, relatively speaking, collection of anash, chassidim. There were many Lubavitcher chassidim who settled in London. Many of them were literally 3 or 4 times his age. Some of them learned in Lubavitch, and even they didn't learn in Lubavitch, but they were the age of his parents. And he shows up, and he starts to work. He built a shul, he built a school, everything he did. I was in London. I heard the story from one of his grandchildren, and he showed me the letter. It was an old chassid, a very respectable man, a really respectable man, who had learned in Lubavitch. He was probably 60 years older than Nachman, 50 years older for sure. And Rabbi Nachman Sudak would make events. It was Kislev, it's Shevat. And naturally the Anash would gather. And he was the shliach, so he was taka yunga manchikol, but he would speak. And this old chassid would sit in the corner and mutter under his breath, loud enough for people to hear, yeah, I played it. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He would make fun of him. He would make fun of him. This young Lubavitcher, who went through Shiva Madud again and never had a normal yeshiva experience, was the Rebbe shliach. And this old chassid would sit in the corner and mutter, but loud enough for people to hear, I played it. It was one of Rabbi Sudak's many nisyonis. He had to take it. And the Rebbe wrote this old chassid a letter. And he writes to him as follows. I got word that I sent a young shliach to London who's doing the things that you should have done. I should never have sent a shliach to London. There's so many anash. You need a young shliach from America to build a yeshiva, to build a shul. You should have done it. You didn't put your finger in cold water. You sat there, an old holy roller, let the world serve me. He was never in Lubavitch. Grew up in the worst time a Jew can grow up. Never saw Yemei Ha'oid. He didn't have a normal upbringing. He didn't see the early days in Lubavitch. He came to London, and he's doing what you should have done. And you sit and mutter under your breath insults. And the Rebbe writes, I assure you he did not tell me, he never would. I heard from other people. And the Rebbe says, I do not believe that these words are going to make any difference. I think you're going to continue being disrespectful. But I have to file a protest. You've been in London for 15 years. You didn't do a thing. I sent the Americana Boychikul, a young generation, the next generation kid. Yeah, you're right, he's not as a big a Talmud Chacham as you. But the question becomes, what have you done? And you sit and undermine him? And the Rebbe says, I'm writing this letter not because I think it's going to help, but because I have an obligation to protest. I have an obligation to protest. I saw this letter in the hands of one of Rabbi Sudak's grandchildren. And he told me that this old chassid received this letter from the Rebbe, and he never, ever again opened his mouth. No, but the Rebbe said, I don't think it's going to make a difference. He got the message. He got the message. So Rabbi Nachman Tzudek was not a BT, he wasn't about tshuva, but he was about tshuva. We're all about the tshuva. Favos. Because our lives are defined by tzama l'chanafshi. Our lives are not defined by what we have, but we wish we had. We wish we had. And this is true especially of the children. The boys and the girls that I teach, their whole chassidus is a chassidus of tzama. So the Baal Shem Tov turns this song around. Instead of tzama being gvei is mir, I missed out, the tzama says this desire is stronger than having. If you remember the 70s and the 80s, the way the Rebbe celebrated the Baalei Tshuva, the way he loved them, the way the Rebbe saw, the Rebbe couldn't do enough, the Rebbe's love for the Baalei Tshuva, the Rebbe felt that it was our obligation, it was our Nash obligation to support the Baalei Tshuva, and that the honest truth was, some did and some didn't. Kran Haidt had people who felt the Baalei Tshuva were an invasion. And then those who understood these are the Rebbe's kinder, the Baalei Tshuva, the Rebbe's children. They're the Rebbe's children. I know for a fact that I saw the letter. My father, I just showed this to me, my father wrote a letter to the Rebbe in the 80s. With a proposal to make a separate community for the Baalei Tshuva. And a whole bunch of other points about what he thought would be appropriate for the Baalei Tshuva. And the Rebbe's answer was, we're one community. He didn't answer any other points. All the other points that speak to this one, speak to this one. But about the question of making the Baalei Tshuva separate Yehilim, the Shumei finished. We're one community. The Rebbe didn't want it. The Rebbe wanted that Anash, the Azegirah for the Holy Rollers, should support the Baalei Tshuva in such a way that we should be an integrated community. I don't think we did such a good job, honestly. But this is true. That you could explain that Rebbe's tzama l'chanafshi, not that he's looking back to a world that was, but he was singing what is. That Rebbe was saying what is. We live in a generation where we're more defined by what we don't have than by what we have. And the want is stronger than the have. In other words, you don't have to say that the Rebbe's someone was, I grew up in a different world and now I'm in this world and I have to serve Hashem in this world and I have to do b'simcha. No. This is the world. This is the world of want. It's no doubt about it. It's no doubt about it. Not that the Rebbe was singing. I don't know why the Rebbe sang it, but this is true of our generation. We're a generation of want. And if you study the Rebbe's philosophy, lechatchila ribe, shtus de kedusha, tshuva law, the Rebbe talked to us in ways that the Alter Rebbe didn't speak to his Hasidim. The Rebbe talked about the idea that a person could skip 1,000 steps. Always. The Rebbe talked about the idea that a person 1 minute is here, the next minute is in the highest Madrigas. The Rebbe wasn't saying it to patronize us or to be dramatic. The Rebbe actually believed that in our generation, a person can go from here to here in an instant. Because when the motivation is not what I have, but the motivation is what I don't have, the drive that comes from not having is far stronger than the drive that comes from having. In Tanya chapter 7, Perek Zayin, the Rebbe talks about tshuva. And he quotes the Gemara. That the Gemara says, Zdein is nafla gezochis. When a person does tshuva, the sins become merit. The Avedas become mitzvahs. The Rebbe says, why? Because the hoya of al-yedei zeh, hu bal the avad abazu. The motivation of the Baal Tshuva is the distance. It's not the closeness. And because the motivation of the Baal Tshuva is the distance, that means the distance brought him to the Tshuva. If the distance brought him to the Tshuva, the distance is a part of the Tshuva. That makes Zavein into a mitzvah. It's a Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya. And I personally believe we're a generation of Baalei Tshuva. However you were born, we're a generation of people, even those of us who grew up at the Rebbe's feet, we're a generation of people who are defined more by what we want than by what we have. So it's not,
America.
It's America, yeah. See, but in America you can very easily fall asleep. You can become shikar with materialism. You can. And that's the risk. That you study Basi Lagani, at every line he's reminding you, be careful, don't get intoxicated by material. It's a distraction. It puts you to sleep. You know, I heard from people, I mean, this is not my generation, I saw Chassidim who came from Russia, not too many, but a few. I saw that Mendel, I saw Michal Teitelbaum, Mendel Baroza, and they described that people would freeze. I don't want to finish the sentence. Freezing is the most pleasant death. You push it, fall asleep, and you don't wake up. And there are famous stories of Chassidim walking in the wintry Siberian night. I want to rest for 2 minutes. If you stop to rest for 2 minutes, you never got up. And Michal Teitelbaum would wake you, would kick you, get up. I want to rest for 1 minute. No, don't stop. Because if you're going to rest, you're going to fall asleep, and you fall asleep. The challenge of the materialism, Gashmias, it's a wonderful bracha to have all this wealth. But it slowly, it puts you to sleep. It's such a pleasant way, but you wake up and then what happened? I talk about this every single Farbrengen, and I'm sure I talk about this Kislev. Moshe Yes, right? Moshe Yes's song My Zaidi is the story of American Jews. It's like inspired by God. He was a very talented man, but God wrote this song. It's incredible. Because what did he say in the song? He says nobody didn't want to be religious. It just happened. It just happened. Why? Because we didn't pay attention. We didn't pay attention. This is the test. This is the test. So the alternative to that is a hunger. It's not I'm rich and I have a hunger. The hunger. American Hasidim are defined more by what they want than by what they have. And I think that's a different way of explaining what the Rebbe means when the Rebbe says summer. He's not talking about himself. He's talking about us. We live in a time of summer. The thirst, the want is an incredible motivator. I have to use it to the Eibishter. The children, our boys and girls who never saw the Rebbe, their motivation is summer. If you know them well and you watch, I have children who listen to whole Farbrengens. You know that? Before Shvat, they sit down. Some of them stand, but they put on a video and they try to create a mood. They're actually standing by the Rebbe 770, and they stand there 6 hours. They participate in the Farbrengen. They want to recreate for themselves a sense of that experience in as real a way, in as human a way as possible. And their motivation is tzama. And the tzama is stronger than the cane. The halavai is stronger than the cane. So the message, the end of the speech is, the point of the speech is, the motivation of the Baal Tshuva is he's not what he has, but what he wants. We all have that want. We have to maintain, we have to sustain the desire. You feed the desire by learning Torah. You feed the desire by learning Chassidus. You feed the desire by doing the things that Rebbe says to do. But you never put the desire in a position where desire is satisfied. Because desire is satisfied, that's no good. Even if it's true. Even if it's true that desire has been satisfied, satisfaction is an end. You want the urgency. You want the tzoma. L'chaim v'levracha. We shouldn't get depressed. We shouldn't get down. But we should be driven by a hunger, a tzoma. Oh, I have a friend of mine who studies. Do me a favor. I'm running the show over here. You don't like it, gesundheit hate, but I'm going to do it my way. The more you tell me to stop, the longer I'm going to talk. I have a friend who studies personalities. He has a whole graph, Eish, Ruach, Mayim, Offer, and then he says to me about myself, and it's quite true. He says, you're Eish, Offer. What Eish, Offer means? You hate yourself, so you're driven by that hatred to do another thing. It's true. It's my personality. I wish I had a different person. That's what I got. But a person needs to always be driven by the tzama, by the want. It's not good enough. That's what the Rabbi used to say. I'm happy, but I'm not satisfied. L'chaim v'levracha, l'chaim. L'chaim take the shot. L'chaim v'levracha, l'chaim v'levracha, l'chaim v'levracha, l'chaim v'levracha, l'chaim v'levracha. Huh? You didn't sing guys last night. L'chaim. Let's sing Ata v'chartanu. Which one? Oy Ata v'chartanu mikol ha'amim. I want to share with you something. Just a minute. I want to share something with you. The Rebbe taught this niggun in Tafshin Chaf Aleph, 1960 to 61. The Rebbe taught this niggun in Tafshin Chaf Aleph. And when the Rebbe taught the niggun, he said that this niggun is two nigunim. There's one niggun where you sing each word once, all the way through. Then you sing it, we repeat the words over and over again, and it goes around in a circle and never finishes. So the Rebbe said that these two, it goes together. It's two nigunim in Atavachatanu. The Rebbe said when you sing each word once, that's the madrega of tzaddik. But they're going around and around and around and around. This is madrega of al-tshuva. So the Rebbe said that you sing the tzaddik niggun twice and you're done with the tzaddik. But the Baal Tshuva never finishes. It goes on and it goes on and it goes on and it goes on. So it's consistent with the theme that we're discussing, that we're a generation of Baalei Tshuva. We're a generation of Baalei Tshuva. Our primary motivation is want. And there's something about wanting which is stronger than having. I just would like to make a suggestion. I want to thank everybody who was mavater in the Super Bowl to come to the Farbrengen. Whether it was a Vita, you know what I'm saying. When it comes to the Super Bowl, even if you're not interested, you're interested. So it was a Mesiras Nefesh, even if it's not a Mesiras Nefesh. But this is for us, Yud Shvat. So let's sing out the Rebbe's niggun, okay? So if you want to put on your hat and your jacket and your gadol. The Farbrengen isn't finished. But let's sing out the Rebbe's niggun when people are still here. You know, when I was a kid growing up, you sang the Alter Rebbe's niggun after everybody went home. You know, 5 guys left. So we're talking Alter Rebbe's niggun to Zaman, okay? And of course you sing a niggun before and a niggun after. Okay, another nigga from the Rebbe. Let's sing it even the Rebbe, okay? Rachamon no de yamne de yamne la de yamne do Rachamon no de yamne la de yamne do Rachamon no de yamne spirei Show them no, okay, what do I want to tell you? I want to change the subject completely. We should really sing a bunch in the good because I want to go in a whole other direction. There's a recording, there's an audio recording. Because today they're finding videos and audios that are so precious that we didn't know existed from decades ago with the Rebbe. Besides for the stories that people tell, they're finding original audios of the Rebbe that we didn't know about. So there's an interesting little recording from 1968. It's almost 60 years ago, 1968. That the then mayor of New York City came to the Rebbe. His name was Mayor Lindsay. Before Mayor Beam, but Mayor Lindsay. I'm sorry?
Such a handsome man.
He was handsome. Okay, I'm sure he was. Was he a good mayor? It's another story, but he was handsome. Okay. What happened was, for those who remember, I mean, I was not living in Grand Heights at the time. I was too little. The city had gone crazy. It became very violent. My father said to me, when he was a bocher, you could literally go to sleep on a park bench in Eastern Park. It was so safe. In the 50s, Grand Heights was so safe. No one locked their doors. In a very, very short time, that changed. By the mid-60s, it was dangerous to walk the streets of Grand Heights. I mean, I remember the 70s were plenty dangerous. And they got worse and worse. I mean, so Mayor Lindsay comes to the Rebbe. And you can hear, it's audio, it's not video. But you can hear the whole conversation where he tells the Rebbe that they're making Crown Heights a pilot program. There was violence all over the city. The city was out of control. New York was out of control, mamish. A lot of people thought New York was finished. New York has had such a resurgence, it's unbelievable. Can't buy a house in Crown Heights. You want to die for the resurgence. Forget about Manhattan, Brooklyn. Can't buy a house. People are going to the fancy neighborhoods of Long Island because it's cheaper to buy a house over there than in Crown Heights. But New York in the late 60s and the 70s was going in the direction of, it was mamish becoming burnt out buildings. No, the real estate had no value. Nobody wanted to own it, let alone invest. And this continued into the 80s. You know, that's why the real estate was so cheap at that point. But Crown Heights was particularly dangerous, with a lot of violence. And the city was trying to find solutions. So they decided to make a pilot program. I don't know exactly what the pilot program consisted of, but clearly you had to do it with additional policing and to assert the rule of law. It shouldn't be lawless. That, you know, people, kids who violate the law should be properly punished and prosecuted. So he tells this to the Rebbe. And you hear the Rebbe's response. And you also hear how the Rebbe's words, you can almost hear the Rebbe's words go straight over his head. He doesn't even hear what the Rebbe is telling him. I mean, he's a politician. Politicians, you know, they wait for you to finish talking so they can say what they want to say. And so the Rebbe says to him, this is good for the criminals also. Because if a criminal, and you have to understand, most of these criminals were teenagers, they were kids. And they were not criminals because they were bad people. They were criminals for two reasons. Number one, they had absolutely no hope, no prospects. And it was easy. It was easy. You know, the Gemara says, the thief isn't the mouse. The thief is the hole where the mouse can hide when he steals. That was the situation. So the Rebbe says to Mayor Lindsay, it's good for them also. Because if you punish them for small crimes, you will teach them that they shouldn't commit crimes, and they will grow up to be proper citizens. And you literally hear Mayor Lindsay not listen. It's immaterial because Mayor Lindsay is a politician. It's all about how it's going to benefit him. And the Rebbe says to him, when you allow a 16 or 17 or 18-year-old boy or girl, whatever nationality, doesn't make a difference, commit crimes, you are making them a criminal. You are making them a criminal. Why? You're teaching them that crime pays. You can get away with it. And the more they get away with it, the more severe the crime will become. So the Rebbe says to Mayor Lindsay's coming to the Rebbe to tell the Rebbe, look, I'm helping you out. The Rebbe doesn't even hear that. The Rebbe is not hearing that Mayor Lindsay is doing Crown Heights a favor. He wasn't goydish that. Why? Because the Rebbe is not thinking about Crown Heights. The Rebbe is thinking about the black kids who are committing the crimes. And the Rebbe says to the mayor, it's very, very important that you hold the kids responsible for small crimes, not because they're ruining the peace in the city, which was true, because you're teaching them not to be criminals. You have to listen to the recording, and you can get it. You can go Google Mayor Lindsay and the Rebbe on YouTube. You'll find it in a heartbeat. You can listen to the whole conversation. You hear him talking. You hear the Rebbe responding. And like I said, you almost can hear Mayor Lindsay not listen to the Rebbe. This attitude of the Rebbe's repeats itself over and over again in 1,000 sichos, in 1,000 ways. The two biggest examples for this that I sort of feel, because I grew up with them, is the two campaigns that the Rebbe made. The first is Tzivus Hashem, and the second is the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Neach. When the Rebbe made the campaign for Tzivus Hashem, I mean, listen, it's not a secret that we have a problem in America. And we have a new president, so how does that change things? So far, the words are amazing. The words are unbelievable. How the words translate into action remains to be seen. I'm supposed to think that Trump is the Messiah. I'm a bad Jew. I think the Messiah has to have a bris milah, and he has to have a Jewish mother, and he has to be a Chassidish Yid. From all I know, Trump doesn't have a bris milah, and his mother, and he's not. Maybe his daughter is a Chassidish Meidel, but he's not a Chassidish Yid. Trump is not the Messiah. Maybe he's saying, maybe he's
He's the donkey. I just think he's the donkey. He's the chamar.
I am very. I'm very. What is the word? I'm very concerned. I don't think it's pashut. For Yidden and Yisrael especially. But okay, you don't want to hear my opinion, and I don't want to tell it to you. I want to talk about my topic. When the Rebbe made Tzivos Hashem, he called it an army. And the philosophy of Tzivos Hashem, as the Rebbe presented it, I don't know if you know, the Rebbe planned Tzivos Hashem for a long time. The Rebbe said to someone in a letter that he made a pilot program. Pesach, 1980, the Rebbe made a pilot program. He tested it with Tzivos Hashem. And then in the fall, Sukkot, the Rebbe made Tzivos Hashem. What was the concept? The concept was you give children instructions. You give children things to do. And the children are supposed to do them. Period. Not ask why. Do what they're told. This is what the Rebbe was thinking. And the Rebbe said the kids will be given rewards, but not big rewards. The reward is going to be a star, or a band, going up in rank. Meaning to say that the children are going to know that the reward that they get for the following instructions is not the psak, it's simply a recognition of their efforts, and they grow up in rank. Huh? This is what the Rebbe's idea was. So he started in Pesach of 1980. I was then 14 and a half. I remember the matzah ball contest well. And then in the following Sukkot, the Rebbe announced Tzivos Hashem. He wrote a letter, Chalamoid Sukkot, which he didn't sign, in which he said that this organization that we're now founding is going to be called Tzivos Hashem, the Army of Hashem. I don't know if you remember this, but that Tishrei, that Simchas Torah, 1980 to 81, the Rebbe danced with the children. The Rebbe always went the first Hakafa and the last Hakafa with his brother-in-law, the Rashag. He was not there in 1980 because he had a stroke. He was in the hospital. The Rebbe danced himself. But the Rebbe went the third Hakafa, the fifth Hakafa, the Rebbe danced with the children. And it was the Rebbe and the kids. And that's it. The Rebbe and the kids. And the Rebbe organized Hakafa. The Rebbe waited like 10 or 15 minutes that there should be enough space for the children. The Rebbe screamed at the Bacharim who were outside the Ches, move back! The Rebbe didn't start to dance until there was enough room for all the children to stand. Some of the children were inside, and many of the children, the Rebbe pushed the Bacharim back, not with his hands, but with his words. Rabbi Groner was trying to help the Rebbe, pushed them away. The Rebbe organized 770. He didn't start to dance until all the children who were there had place, and he danced with the kids. I was already 14 and a half. But I know guys a couple of years younger than I. They were 11, 12, they danced with the Rebbe. And one of them told me that when they finished that dance, they felt so close, they felt so comfortable with the Rebbe, that they started shaking his hand. Shaking a Rebbe's hand in Chabad is a no-no. But they felt like the Rebbe was their grandfather. And the Rebbe shook our hands very happily. There was a bonding of the Rebbe and the children with nobody else in between them. It was such an incredible moment. This was connected to the Tzivos Hashem. But there was a rally that the Rebbe made, Chalamoid Sukkot. And in that rally, the Rebbe articulated the mission statement, the vision of Tzivos Hashem. And what the most important component of that entire thing was discipline. You're given an instruction from your commander-in-chief, or as the Rebbe said it, commander-in-chief. The first thing you do is what you're told. You want to understand why? You can ask later. Right now, you got to listen. And when the Rebbe made Tzivos Hashem, he actually wrote a letter, which is published. If you can't find the letter, there's a website that I heard about that's called Inside Chasidus. I have a very, very big Rebbe page. If you go to the Chassidus, I have the history of each one of the Rebbeim. My Rebbe page is very long. I go through the entire biography of the Rebbe, and I have a class on every one of the Rebbe's Miftzayim, including Tzivos Hashem. If you open up those folders, you don't have to listen to me talk. Every class comes with a PDF. Just download the PDF and read. I compiled the sichos and the letters and that the Rebbe spoke about each mitzvah. You don't even have to hear my voice. You could just read the Rebbe's own words. A psychologist who was also an educator wrote the Rebbe a letter around 1982. And he writes to the Rebbe that he objects to the use of the word army. And he suggests that he changes the name of the organization. And he writes to the Rebbe because the army has an automatic connotation of violence, and he doesn't think it's good for children to have that kind of an experience. The Rebbe wrote him a long letter, which is printed in many places, including on Inside Chassidus. You can see the letter. I copied it and I posted it. The Rebbe writes to him, I've been in America for 40 years, and the civilization is falling apart. Why? Because there's no more decency. Right and wrong is defined by one thing: whether you're going to be prosecuted. There's no inherent right and wrong, just getting caught and not getting caught. And then the Rebbe says, a bunch of liberal judges and politicians who disarm the militia, the police, so the kids can do whatever they want. And the Rebbe says the society is breaking down. As no society can live by the threat of imprisonment alone. You cannot build a society based on the fact that if you do a crime, you're going to go to jail. Why? Because you can get away with it. Especially in a liberal society. There needs to be an inherent sense of right and wrong. This is wrong. You're not allowed to do it. And the Rebbe said, I made Tzivos Hashem. And the Rebbe writes the letter to this professor, to the psychologist, to this teacher, educator. I thought long and hard. The Rebbe writes, I thought long and hard. If we're going to give America back a conscience, we need to find a model that's predicated on the idea that you don't only do what you want. You don't only do what you agree with. You don't only do what you understand. You do what you're told. And the Rebbe writes in Hebrew, it's phoneticized in English, Kabbalah Seil. And the Rebbe said the only place in American civilization where there's a semblance of that left is in the military. So I had Poshet no choice. I had to use the word army. And the Rebbe goes on to say that he worked very hard to remove any of the symbols that would conjure up violence and war, but I had to use the word army. Because the Rebbe was saying to this man, I'm not trying to teach people to be good because it feels good. I'm not teaching the people to be good because they're going to be rewarded for it. I'm teaching people to be good because it's the right thing. To me, this meeting with Mayor Lindsay and the Tzivos Hashem have a constant. In a normal society, the government teaches people morality. How? You do a small crime, you get a small punishment, and they don't commit a crime again. When you have a society that says it's not fair, you have to be nice, they're underprivileged, so let them commit crimes. The Rebbe is saying, you know who you're hurting when you allow a 16-year-old boy commit a crime? You're hurting him. You're hurting him a lot more than the store he robs. Because you're teaching him that there has to be a mensch. This bothered the Rebbe so much. The Rebbe bothered him so much. The Rebbe said, what is this? You're being kind to children, to kids, to adolescents, to teenagers. You're telling yourself that this makes you a good person. And you're destroying them. Why are you destroying them? Because you're basically telling them, I cannot expect you to be a responsible human being, so you don't have to be. And the Rebbe says, whoa, whoa, whoa. You respect this kid. You like this kid. You're worried about his race. And this is your solution? To let him commit crimes because that's make it fair? You're destroying him. It ate the Rebbe up. It ate the Rebbe up. It ate the Rebbe up. And it continues to eat the Rebbe up. Because it hasn't gotten better, it's gotten worse. Like, if anybody thinks I'm here to speak politics, I'm not. Believe me. And it's not about race. I want to share with you this thinking of the Rebbe, because it's a thinking that's very, very important. It's very, very important. The Rebbe says when a kid commits a crime and you punish him, you're doing him a favor. Now the punishment doesn't fit the crime, obviously. You're not going to destroy his life. But there's a value in punishment. There's a value in disciplining people, because when you discipline people, you teach them righteousness. You know, I live in the hug generation. I've evolved. I used to be the angry rabbi. I'm not the angry rabbi anymore. I'm the hug and mushy-feely rabbi. When I was an angry rabbi, I actually taught people things. They made them grow up. Now I give hugs, and a lot doesn't happen. You know what I'm saying? This is how it is. The kids have to figure it out themselves. But the Rebbe, whatever, I teach in more than one school. I'm not the same person. If you follow my classes, you listen to 2 classes, you can't believe it's the same man. I teach the Bachrim, I scream at them and I insult them. You know what I'm saying? I teach the guys upstairs, I give them hugs. Every environment, wherever you work, you have to adapt to the children. But the Rebbe saw the terrible mistake. You know, there's an old Yiddish expression. It goes back more than 100 years. Noshim Rachmani is Bishlu Yaldeyan. It's in the Teicheche. It's in the terrible part of the Chumash, which describes the Jewish suffrage. When Hashem is going to punish the Jewish people. The literal meaning of the words is Noshim Rachmani is Bishlu. Compassionate mothers will cook their own children. Now it literally means people are dying of hunger, and that's what they do. But Chassidim am geteicht. Noshim Rachmanis, when a mother has too much Rachmanis on her children, she cooks them, she ruins them. Why? You want a kid to grow up? Teach him how to be a mensch. Teach him how to be a mensch, hold him accountable. Hold him accountable means there's a right and a wrong, and he can't say, well, you're underprivileged. That's how the Rebbe spoke in the 60s. In the 60s, he said about the black kids in New York then, and believe me, it's a different New York City today. If you have rachmanis on those kids, you will punish them for small crimes. And if you don't have rachmanis on those kids, you'll be nice to them and say that you're an open-minded, compassionate person, and you're literally destroying them. And this phenomena today is our own children. It's not the black kids in the inner city anymore. Because this idea of Kabbalah Sale, children have to grow up and they have to carry their part of the burden. It's very tricky. Why? Because there's so many exceptions to the rule. There are children, Take. I know, I teach them, who need hugs. But not all the kids need hugs. Some of the kids need to be taught discipline, Kabbalah Sale. When the Rebbe made Tzivos Hashem, that's how he explained it. The Rebbe said, I'm making Tzivos Hashem because I want to teach children that they have to do the right thing and not do the wrong thing. Because God said, not because they're going to be rewarded, and not even because they're going to be punished. So it's a variation, it's an alternative to what the Rebbe said to the mayor. But the idea is Kabbalah Sale. Kabbalah Sale. A few years after the Rebbe made Tzivos Hashem, literally 2 years after, 2.5 years after, the Rebbe began to talk about the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nei Neach. He spoke about the first time before Pesach, 1983. And I was then already a big boy. I thought I knew everything in the world. In 1983, I was how old? It's hysterical. I was 17 and a half, but I was a know-it-all. I'm getting dumber and dumber as time passes. For more than one reason. So when the Rebbe spoke about the Sheva Mitzvahs, the Rebbe spoke about it a lot. He spoke about it Pesach, Yaf Nissen, and the Rebbe spoke about it every single Farbrengen for months. He defended it. They'd be speaking an hour. Every Shabbos, the Rebbe defended the Sheva Mitzvahs. B'chlal, when the Rebbe made a campaign, obviously he quoted the Torah. The Rebbe didn't make up his own stuff. And then the Rebbe would defend it. He would argue, defend it for months after the Rebbe was defending the Sheva Mitzvahs. When the Rebbe made the Sheva Mitzvah Neach campaign, he said, first of all, he said that it's the last halachas in the Rambam right before Mashiach. Right before Mashiach, the Sheva Mitzvahs. Which means that before Mashiach comes, you have to speak about the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nei Neach, 7 laws of Neach. Additionally, the Rebbe said that Jews traditionally did not talk about the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nei Neach because they were afraid of an anti-Semitic pushback. And I have at home on my computer a note The Rebbe actually wrote, a little while after he started the campaign, that he sees an increase in anti-Semitism and that Chabad should withdraw then, 40 years ago, from this campaign. Now, what the Rebbe didn't say the campaign is cancelled. At that time, the Rebbe wrote there's an increase in anti-Semitism and that Chabad should pull back. This I have the note on my computer, not the original, a copy of it. But when the Rebbe spoke with the Shevat Mitzvahs, he explained the campaign. And the language that the Rebbe used was Ayin Re'eh Ve'ezen Shemas V'chol Masech B'Sefer Nechtavim. There's an eye that sees and there's an ear that hears, and everything you say is written in a book. Meaning, the Rebbe did not make the campaign of Shevat Mitzvahs so a guy should feel good. A guy should have El Mahaba. He said, Ata Osid Litin Din V'Cheshbon. One day you're going to meet your Maker and you're going to have to give a reckoning. In other words, just like when the Rebbe made Shevat Hashem, Tzivos Hashem, he didn't speak to the kids that they'll feel good or they'll get an award. But there's somebody who's giving you an instruction and you have to do it whether you like it or not. When the Rebbe made the campaign for Shevat Mitzvah, he said the same thing. God is watching. In other words, the thinking of the Rebbe was Kabbalah Sel in both of these campaigns. The thinking of the Rebbe is what we would call Yiras Hashem. You don't do this only because you want to, you do it because you have to. The world we live in has gone more and more in the direction of how do you feel. 40 years ago, this was very new in America. Today, it's generational already. How do I feel? And how do I like it? Or do I not like it? The Rebbe didn't like it. The Rebbe held that you cannot build a civilization based on people's feelings. You have to build a civilization based on the fact that there's a right and a wrong, and you have to follow the rules. And it's the job of government to enforce those rules, not to be mean, but to teach the rules. To teach the rules. People have to know that there's accountability. And when you try to be nice, you're hurting the people to whom you're being nice. This is the thinking of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. This is the thinking, in other words, is the Rebbe liberal? Is the Rebbe open-minded? The Rebbe was so loving and so accepting. But at the same time, the Rebbe was also principled. And the Rebbe preached and taught and established the idea that a civilization cannot live on hugs alone. A civilization on love alone. It has to be based on discipline, on Kabbalah Sale. That's what the Rebbe taught. Today, this challenge is our own kids. It's not the African-American inner-city kid. It's our own children. Today, this is in our schools and it's in our homes. And it's tricky, it is complicated, because the fact of the matter is, there's no doubt in my mind that the children are much more sensitive than we were. And I was plenty sensitive. It's a new generation. The kids need to feel loved. There's just no way around that. And the emes is, the Rebbe said it 60 years ago. I saw an interview with a rabbi from the Young Israel who was a member of the Young Israel's school system. He met the Rebbe in the 60s. A whole group had went into the Rebbe. And the Rebbe said to them then that in the old country, you could educate children through discipline, by criticizing, by pointing out flaws. He says, in America, you have to show the kids love. And when you listen to this man tell that story, when you show children love as a way of motivating them, it works because they feel safe, because they feel peaceful. But on the other hand, if a person is going to grow, they got to be pushed. And love is it's not pushing people, it's the opposite. It's tricky. The kids, you cannot raise kids today. You couldn't raise kids 50 years ago in America without love. There has to be love. But within the parameter of that love, there has to be education. And education is teaching right and wrong. Education is teaching the kid a simple message. You don't only do what you have to do when you're in the mood. You do what you have to do because you have to do it. To figure out as parents and as educators the different kinds of challenges. How to communicate to the child love. At the same time, communicate to the child what the Rebbe would call Kabbalah Sels. K-A-B-A-L-O-S. O-L in English. For that it says Kabbalah Sel. With the love is a challenge. But it's still true. It's still true. It's true for everybody. It's true for our own children. It's true for our communities. And it's a point that has to be raised on Shevat. Shevat is the Rebbe's Nesius. And the Rebbe's Nesius is very dynamic. The Rebbe's vision and the Rebbe's teachings are not simple. They're very complicated. There's so many components. Before we talked about tshuva and extreme and going from very bad to very good, which is a very big part of the Rebbe's thinking. But this is also a part. It's a different part. But it's a part. It's a part. It's a part. We are parents. I mean, my kids are, I still have kids at home, but they're a little bigger. And my kids have tightness to me. My kids have tightness, all kinds of tightness. Some kids said I loved them too much. Some kids I didn't love them enough. But Baruch Hashem, every one of my kids has complaints. Why? That's just the way the game is played. And then they grow up and they raise their own children. The children have the same complaints to them, and it goes on and on and on. But you hope you put something into your children that stays. You hope you put something in your children that allows them to go away with the message. My parents really loved me. No matter how they behaved, as much as I have tightness, they ruined my life. Every child's life was ruined by his parents. But you know what else? Every child's life was created by the same bums. You see, you're not allowed to obfuscate. You can't be afraid to parent. You can't be afraid to parent. You have to do your job. And parenting involves teaching your children right and wrong. And it has to be a Kabbalah sale. It's a teaching of the same Rebbe, with all the love. The same Rebbe said no society can exist without Kabbalah sale. For society to work, young people have to learn you don't only do what you want when you want, you do it when you're told. And today, that's unsere Kinder in our schools, from the Hasidic homes, it's a challenge, but it's critical to know. Now, I don't know if I'm talking to educators. I think I'm talking to parents. Some of you are not older than me, or some of you are still younger than me. Some of you have kids at home. And then you have you and your wife, and you talk and you disagree, and this one, every kid is an exception. A house full of exceptions. We have a house full of exceptions. It's true. And to have enough mind space to simply understand our children, and then to make a plan of how we're going to raise each one, and then to implement our children is so difficult, because we're so burdened and we're so distracted by so many things. But this is the number one obligation, responsibility we have. And it's part of our job to figure out how to teach our children that you don't only do what you want to do when you want. You know the story to feed a Rabbi? I'm sure I told you this, Kislev. I may be repeating the same drasha. If I did, I apologize. I don't know. But the Fiedeke was a little kid, and his father called him in. And his father told him how to do Meida'ani in the morning. You put your hands together, you bend your head, and you say Meida'ani, and then you wash Negelas. So the Fiedeke must have been 3 or 4. The Fiedeke said to his father, why? Farvas, why? So the Rebbe Rashab sent the Fiedeke Rebbe to call a 70-year-old chassid, who was a simple man, worked in the house, but he was raised 70 years before in a Hasidic home. And he calls him in, and he says to this old man in front of the Fiedeke Rebbe, what do you do wake up in the morning? He says, you say Meidani. How do you say Meidani? You sit up, you put your hands together, and you bend your head. You say Meidani. By the way, I was once at a Farbrengen with Rav Nachman Sudak, I mentioned before, and he swears that you're not supposed to put your hands together, you're supposed to put your hands near each other, because putting your hands together may not be the right thing, but okay, I don't know. I have a friend. Huh? Like this. The finger should not cross. I have a friend who just now started a new group where he does every day a minhag. Every day one ritual, one thing. And if anybody wants to join, I'll be happy to give you it's 50 seconds, 40 seconds. Every day a custom. Watch it, how you do things. He's a layman, he's a businessman, but he's very precise about halacha, by nature. And I've been bothering him to do it for a while. He just started last weekend. It's a good group to join. It takes less than a minute a day. And he doesn't give speeches. He just says, this is how you do this. This is how you do this. It's really worthwhile. Because I believe that one of the biggest issues that we face, I see it with the kids, is ignorance. kids do things that they're not supposed to do and you get upset at them, they don't know. They don't know. Lubavitcher kids in Lubavitcher homes, they don't know. You have to teach them. You have to teach them. You have to teach them. They don't know what you want from them. They verstehen nicht. In any case, so the story was that the Rebbe Rashab called him this old man, and in the presence of the Rebbe, he says to this old man, "What do you do? Wake up in the morning?" I say Meidani. How do you say Meidani? I put my hands together. I bend my head and say Meidani. So the Rebbe Rashab says to him, "Why?" Because this is what my father told me. And the Rebbe Rashab told him to leave. He turned to the Frierdiker Rebbe. He says, "You understand? You understand? This is my father told me." It's a yesod. A lot of us are afraid to do this with our own kids because we're confused by the liberal thinking. You have a 2-year-old kid who's making trouble and you're giving him a philosophical conversation. When a 2-year-old kid makes trouble, you stop him. When I was growing up, when I first got married, there was the old Dr. Spock. Since Dr. Spock, I believe, evolved. In the Dr. Spock that my wife was given when she got married, which we used to read like the Bible, Dr. Spock writes, he changed his mind after our edition, that a child until 5 who's misbehaving, you can physically move him from one place to another. The mistake that we make is a little kid is making trouble, yeah? The way you stop a kid from making trouble is you move him. You don't give him a speech. You don't philosophize with him. You move him. But you don't have to move him with anger. If a kid's misbehaving, so I'm frustrated. The frustration is wrong. Why? He's a kid. You have to use your mind, not your heart. When someone does something wrong, you have to stop them. You don't have to be angry at them. The anger is misplaced. Always. Always. Especially with children.
That's the Rambam.
That's
from the Rambam.
Yeah. But the stopping the bad behavior, not letting him continue the behavior instead of sitting down and explaining it to him because you want him to have his own choice when the kid is 4, that's donkey-esque. It's absolutely asinine. And for those who understand what the word asinine means, the first 3 letters of the Shoydish.
You said donkey.
I said donkey. Exactly. It's donkey-esque. It's idiotic. And it's considered evolved parent. It's not parenting. It's not parenting. It's wanting your children to like you. The kids are going to grow up hating you because they're going to feel like they were not raised. They weren't parented. It's true. You know how I know? Because the kids are telling this to me. Medav, Hodav, and the Kinder. Anger, terrible. To let out on your child your frustration is a sin. But to understand your obligation, you have to teach your children right and wrong, not by giving them speeches, by showing them. This is something that Rebbe spoke about inner city African American children. If you care about those kids, you're going to stop them. Not to punish them so they shouldn't steal from the Jewish store. To teach them. That's what Rebbe said. Rebbe said to Lindsay, he Pasha didn't hear the Rebbe's words. Listen to the tape. It's so important. It's so instructional. Rebbe says you're not just protecting Crown Heights. You're teaching these kids who no one is teaching, unfortunately. Right from wrong. And it's a different part of the Rebbe. It doesn't sound consistent with all the lovey-dovey stuff. But it's a part of the same Rebbe. And it's true for us also. This is where it gets hard. When it comes to our kids, when it comes to somebody else's kids, we're all very into Kabbalah. When it comes to ourselves, mitamo. I saw a note from the Rebbe. It's very strong. It's been around for a long time. A person wrote to the Rebbe. I don't know who, and I don't know what the issue is, and I really pray I never find out. What this person wrote to the Rebbe was that he has a certain weakness. I don't know what the weakness is. And he constantly gives into it, like an addiction. He keeps falling back into it. And he writes to the Rebbe that I feel helpless against it. I have no control. And the Rebbe writes back to him, I wish I could quote it verbatim because it's so strong. The Rebbe writes to him, you say you have no control over your addiction. It's nonsense. You just need a little bit of taking responsibility, and you'll have no problem with it. The Rebbe's answer is extremely strong. And again, I don't know to whom it was written. But the Rebbe says you have no control. You don't take responsibility. Take responsibility. Kabbalah sale. If you take responsibility, a little bit of responsibility, this test that you feel has taken you over and you have no control over it, you will master it with relative ease. I saw this years ago, and I made it my screensaver, my computer. Every time I opened it, I would see it. You see this man's handwriting, and the Rebbe crossing out his words and commenting on his words. It's one line. The Rebbe says to him, excuse me, the idea that you have no control is nonsense. Take responsibility. Now, I can only speak for myself. I can't speak for you. I can't speak for him. I can only speak for myself. I know in my own life what my issues are. I know what my issues are. And I'm not about to share them. Why? Because I like myself too much to make a confession here. But I know the issues in my life where I say I don't have any control, and it's simply a question of take responsibility. I say this all the time in Farbrengen. I think it's true. There's all kinds of Yetzer Haras. The worst Yetzer Hara that we face is bad habits. The worst Yetzer Hara that we face is those things that we've allowed ourselves to do repeatedly, and then we have no control. And the Rebbe says, you have control. It's a question of taking responsibility. It's not fun. It doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel peaceful and harmonious, and I don't know what other words to use about being integrative. It's hard. It's tough. But the reality of life is that when we have Kabbalah sale, we grow and it makes us happy. My father, Zazayin Gesund und Stark, is an incredibly interesting man. He's my father. And everything he's raised me, my father raised me. But he's a tough father. He told me once a story about himself, which is poshut incredible. I could never do it in 100 years. My father was working in a company as a computer programmer. I don't know, 71, 72. And his superior was the head of the computer department. In the 1970s, computers was much more complicated than today. It was like a whole big department just to bill and to keep track of inventory and the rest. It was much more labor intensive. The computers have evolved. On your phone, you have more computer power than they had in a whole. I remember a computer the size of a room that was 4 feet above the ground that had to be kept cool with air conditioning. It's all much easier and simpler and cheaper and better. One day, the company that he worked for discovered that the head of the department was poshut a crook. He was a ganav. Meaning, it wasn't that he was not doing his work well. He was destroying the business. They had to fire him without notice. Well, they didn't even give him 2 weeks to, so to speak, phase out. And they came to my father and said, you're the head of this department. My father wasn't trained for it. My father wasn't an altaidenik. He went to a trainee program. He learned on the job. And overnight, he was put in charge. The company was so behind because there was so much neglect. There was neglect in billing. There was neglect in inventory. There was neglect in what do they call it? Paying the employees. Payroll. Every department was neglected. And my father was thrown into a job that he was unprepared for. So he said to me, I thought I was going to drown. It was impossible. So I said to myself, I'm going to divide my day into units. And he gave a certain amount of time to each task. Officially, he worked 8 hours a day. I'm sure he worked more than 8 hours. Officially, 8 hours a day. So he divided up the different tasks that he was given, keeping track of inventory and paying bills and then billing the customers and then paying the payroll in such a way that he gave each part of his job a certain amount of time. Some he gave 2 hours, some he gave 10 minutes. He said, but I said to myself that when the clock strikes 2, I stop in the middle of a sentence and go to my next job. In other words, he was so overwhelmed that he knew that the only way he can get through this is with a discipline without a heart. And he did it. He divided up his day into a series of units. I don't know how many units. Some of them were hours, some of them were minutes. But he had discipline to the second. The minute the time he allotted for that job was over, he moved to the next task, and the next day he went back to it. He told me in 3 months, he was able to live his head above water. Because of Kabbalah, my father has so much discipline. I mean, I'm a hippie compared to him. So much. The self-control, unbelievable. But this is what the Rebbe is talking about. The Rebbe is talking about us teaching ourselves self-management that doesn't focus on how I feel. It focuses on what I do. It's negeya in every part of our lives. It's negeya in Yiddishkeit. Yiddishkeit really is about, Yiddishkeit's the best thing we got. I say to people all the time, and I believe it in my whole heart, Judaism has never made more sense socially than it makes. I met a man years ago who came from Russia. He was a secular man. He says, I didn't become religious because I believed in God. I became religious. I wanted to have a normal family life. I came to this country, very bright guy. I saw what's going on in America. I said, I want my kids to be nuts. I don't want my kids to disown me. He says, I became frum because that's the best way I could ascertain that my children will come home. In other words, the issue to him was Pashut on the Mount Lebanon. It's never made sense than right now. I have kids, more than one or two, who call themselves atheists. I mean, they're atheists like I'm a rocket scientist. Actually, I'm more of a rocket scientist than an atheist. Because the really bright ones are not atheists. To be an atheist, you got to be either brilliant or not particularly smart. You just don't know that you're not particularly smart. But I have students who are not from Spitz Chabad, FFBs, but they all tell me that if I ever get married and have children, I'm going to have to raise them religious. Why? I don't believe in God. I just want them to have a normal life. Now, safe, kol safe. It has to translate into Emunah, into Kim Teiro Mitzvahs, and the whole business. But part of this system is the idea that we do what Hashem says, whether we like it or not. It's called Kabbalah Sel. And today, pardon me, it's part of the challenge in our child rearing, and it's part of the challenge in rearing ourselves. We all talk about growth. I remember years ago, you know, every once in a while you have one of those moments that, like a punch in the stomach. I taught many years, I still teach in Machon Yadas. Then it was called Machon Chana, and now there's Baruch Hashem too. They had, I don't know what the word in biology is, they split in half, now you got two. What's that called? Mitosis. Meiosis.
It's either meiosis or mitosis.
So I was teaching at Machon, and I was, whatever we taught, Siches, whatever I taught on the month. But every once in a while, for all kinds of reasons, I take a day off, and we do Q&A, questions and answers. And the girls would ask any question on their mind, and we talk about it, whatever it was. I've been doing Q&A in all my work, in all my schools. I do it with the boys, I do it with the girls, and it's very, very important. The kids ask questions what they want. Online, I do Q&A, but I almost never post the Q&A they do with the boys and the girls, because when I tell the boys and the girls I can't put online because I'd lose my life. And every time I do, I pay for it. Every time I make an exception and I put up the questions to do with the boys, because I talk to them honestly. I try my best at least. So I'm sitting in this room of young girls, all Bali Tshuva, late teens, early 20s, and they're talking about their issues, and they are in the dorm, where, I mean, the dorm is a place, it's an intense environment, where everybody's trying to grow. Be a little better. It's very tricky and very complicated. And one of the girls bursts out, just plots out of her mouth. Rabbi, I came to the conclusion that working on myself means wishing I was better.
Wishing I was?
Better. Rabbi, I came to the conclusion that working on myself, it's like saying the emperor has no clothes. It was such a terrible thing to say. Why? Because all these girls are talking about growing, schmowing, and this guy says nonsense, nobody grows. We talk about it. We talk about it.
It's true.
And it was so true. It was so painfully true.
That your mice was itch of the muscle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait a second. So I said to her, she just said the truth. You know the story with the emperor's no clothes? Nobody wanted to admit that, but the clothes are for a child. So the emperor says, everybody here is a fool, you're the only one who isn't. Why? You say it the way you see it. You're not afraid to say something which is not PC, you know. So this became the conversation. And the truth of the matter is, two things are true. When most people say they're working on themselves, they're not doing anything. But it doesn't have to be that way. You could work on yourself. You could grow, but it's slow and steady and tedious, and it's work. And people do grow, people do change, step by step. But one foot in front of the other. One foot in front of the other. And in our lives, this is a very realistic thing. So Vaxen, I met a kid who was a student of mine from years ago. He's one of my atheist Talmidim. And we sort of negotiated that I would exercise and he would put on film. I agreed to exercise. He did not agree to put on film. Right after I did twice exercise, if I don't exercise, this can be bad. I must start exercising. I told him I need a motivation. I want to be my motivation. He said, Rabbi, I'll be happy with motivation, but I'm not promising to put on film. He put on film with me. He sent me a picture a couple of days later. He said, I haven't put on film since 2013. He gave away his film. He gave away his film. So I'm going to try a new. I have to exercise. Whether he puts on. See, to me, the issue with exercise is it's hard, and I'm lazy. I know how important it is, and I don't want to do it. And I delay it, and I delay it. I just missed 3 days. I did it Wednesday and Thursday. Then I went to Florida. The big question is going to be tomorrow. If I don't exercise tomorrow, I'm back into the same hole. And those words that the Rebbe wrote, don't tell me it's too hard. A little self-control, and I know it. So am I going to do it? So you can send me a message tomorrow night. Paltiel, you exercised? There's nothing religion about exercising, but for me, it's pasha pekuach nefesh. It's an example of what the Rebbe is saying. We can all grow, but growth is not defined by doing what you feel. Growth is defined by doing what you need to. And if you do what you need to, whether you like it or not, slowly, the Rebbe who was full of love said this. The same Rebbe who was all about ahava, the same Rebbe who said when you meet a Jew, offer him every mitzvah, and whatever mitzvah takes is enough, said, that's the beginning. That's the beginning. You do a mitzvah, you wake up your neshama, it brings you closer to the Eibishter. But in the end, like the Rebbe said, you don't lie to a person. Today you're putting on tefillah, but you should know there's 613 of these. Today you're putting up a mezuzah. You should know there's 600. There's many mitzvahs, and ultimately you got to do them all. And you don't only do them because you want to. You do them because the Rebbe said. It's foundational. So you see, there are sides. There's dynamics. There's dynamics to the Rebbe. There is the side of the Rebbe which is so unconditionally loving, and there's the side of the Rebbe which is so based on discipline. They're not contradictory. They just seem contradictory. They feel contradictory. You feel like the Rebbe of love and the Rebbe of Kabbalah Seil are not the same Rebbe, but they're exactly the same Rebbe. Because the love is in step one. You know, the Rebbe used to speak about this from the Maimer of Chasane. The Rebbe has a Sikha. It's a Pesach Sikha, where the Rebbe brings the Chazal. It's a Gemara, it's a Medrash. That when it comes to the Yetzer Hara, when it comes to your children, and when it comes to your spouse, Smoil doiche v'yamin makarebes. The left hand pushes away, and the right hand embraces. With an emphasis that first the left hand pushes away, and then the right hand embraces. So the Rebbe challenges this. Why? Because it says all over Torah that before you teach, you make a joke, and the child laughs. You bend down, you lift up the child, in the Maimer of Chasane. So the Rebbe says, this is before the relationship. If you want to have a relationship with a child, you have to love the child. But that's not the relationship. That's the bonding, that's the connection. If you're a teacher of students, the students have to know that you love them. And teachers who know how to do that, teachers who know how to communicate to the children genuine love, can discipline. If you don't get that across to your student, you're not allowed to discipline. But, the Rebbe says, the love that you're showing the child is not the chinuch, it's before the chinuch. It's like the joke that the teacher makes to bring the student into the classroom. Once you get past that initial love, the beginning of the relationship is Yira. It's Kabbalah Sale. So both are true. Both are true. It's true that there's the unconditional love, and it's true that the unconditional love creates a framework where you can teach. And teach is about work, and work is about growth, and it's not necessarily so pleasant. The pleasantness comes later. And it's Yud, this is Yud Shevat. This is also Yud Shevat. Just like Yud Shevat is unconditional love, Yud Shevat is about avodah and growth. You know the story with I'll tell you life with Klein. There was a Yid in Australia. I hope I tell the story correctly. After the Second World War, the Australian community of Jews is predominantly Holocaust survivors. You're South African. South Africans are not Holocaust survivors. They came before. And you could see the cultures, the feel of the community is very, very different. South Africa is such a happy place. Australia is a very different world. But they're survivors. I lost my train of thought. So what happened was the Rebbe sent 5 mishpachas of Anash, 6 mishpachas of Anash, to establish Lubavitch in Australia, and they did everything first. The first boys' school, the first girls' school, the first yeshiva. Now I would never step foot into Lubavitch, but all the other moistus, all the kids who would never step foot in Lubavitch, their parents learned in Lubavitch, otherwise they wouldn't be Yidden. It happened in 100 places. But they came to Australia, and the Anash, they were not enough of a community to marry one another, Pasha. So a lot of the Lubavitcher boys and Lubavitcher girls married non-Lubavitchers. Like my father didn't marry Lubavitcher. All my father's friends didn't marry Lubavitchers. There were no Lubavitcher girls in New York. Finished. All the Lubavitcher boys married non-Lubavitchers. In Australia, there was not enough of either gender, and they were the wrong ages, so they married whoever was available. I love to tell this story. This is a parenthesis. I'm going to get back to my story in a minute. There's a man who's still alive. His name is Shmuel Gurevich. He wrote a paperback book, Mr. G. I would advise you to buy it and read it. Not read it, buy it and read it. Let your kids read it also. It's an autobiography. He has a very clear memory. And he writes very nicely and simply. He was a bacharol who came to the Rebbe for Tishrei Tavshin Design 1955 with the intention of staying by the Rebbe. And the Rebbe sent him back and told him to start Siri Agudas Chabad and the Sheikh Chabad. A single boy established Sheikh Chabad. He was incredibly gifted. He was capable. He knew how to make things happen. There was nobody around, so he organized the women of Lubavitch, who was a bachar. He did amazing things. In the 50s, he organized a rally for Sukkot that was so well attended that it was reported on television. And it was a big deal. He was a very successful kid. He had a problem. Bishum Eifin, he couldn't get married. He was a very desirable bachar. He was intelligent, and he was interesting, and he was forward, and he was entertaining. He had a flaw, had a major flaw. Nobody wanted a boy with a beard. The Lubavitcher girls didn't want a boy with a beard. And the Rebbe is writing him letter after letter after letter, keep trying. The end was he had to go to Israel to find a girl. He married a non-Lubavitcher girl. No one in Australia wanted a beard. You understand? And then years later, the Rebbe Pasha begged him to move back to Australia. The Rebbe sent a message to his father. His wife wasn't a Lubavitcher. He sent the message to his father, if it's going to interfere with Shalom Bayis, don't say a word. But if it's maybe not, to say to him, I don't need him in Tel Aviv, I need him in Melbourne. And they moved back officially for a year. They're still there. So I said, now it's 50 years since they moved back. Anyway, so a lot of Lubavitcher girls married Lubavitcher boys. Wonderful people. Bacharim, single guys, survived the Holocaust alone, no families, and remained from. You understand what kind of people you're talking? single kids went through the Holocaust, either as adolescents, as young adults, came to Melbourne. If they had become frei, who would even know? Who? No one would have noticed. And they kept Shay Tatum Mitzvah. They were special. But none of them had beards. So one of them was a man named Klein who married the Chacham Zalman's daughter. The Chacham Zalman was a Pasha, a big chassid. His name was Grevich. He was Shmilik's father. The Mr. G I just spoke about, this is his father. So his sister married this Klein. He was a tzaddik ayid. He just wasn't a card carrying a Lubavitcher. So I may not tell the story correctly, and I'm online, so I'll probably get 100 criticisms. But he came to see the Rebbe, and he sort of apologized for not being a chassid. He was more chassid than all of us. So I forgot how the conversation went, but the Rebbe asked him about himself. And he told the Rebbe that each day he tries to be a little better than the day before. So the Rebbe said to him, and I try to do the same thing. So if you're like me, you must be a Lubavitcher chassid, because last time I checked, I forgot how it was worded, but I'm the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And if every day you try to be a little bit better, then that's a chassid. That's a chassid. That's a chassid. And for us, this is negeya. We talk to our children depending on their situation and their place. Every child needs to be addressed differently. Yes. Before the smell deich and the mekareves, there's a milsa de medichas. Before you set the rules, the kids have to know that you love them. But you want to raise your kids, you have to teach them Kabbalah. And we teach Kabbalah to our children, and we teach Kabbalah to ourselves. But we're all a bunch of hippies. We're a bunch of hippies. So it's hard for us. We're very used to only doing what we feel like doing. If we can get past that, then we could grow. If we could grow, the truth of the matter is we'll make ourselves happy. Tzemes. Okay, I've talked too long. This speech went on too long. I wanted to speak about a different topic. We spoke about Tzalmalach and Nafshi. And it's the hardest thing in a Farbrengen is to talk about something and then change tracks. I wanted to talk about this, and I hope I shared it in a way which is constructive and not critical. And maybe it'll inspire somebody. Chaim v'levracha. I lost my lichts. My lichts extinguished, but my lichts. Chaim, let's sing a nigga for the Rebbe. Anyone you want. I'm assuming you're Ariel because you're on the right side. I can't tell you apart.
There's an obscure.
Sit.
I have to go.
Why? They won already. The Eagles. Unless I have to go shiva for the sheets. For the shiva of the sheets. I was in a taxi last week, and I was asking about the game. The Chiefs and the Eagles. He explained to me that if the Chiefs win this Super Bowl, it'll be the first time that there'll be a three-peat. So apparently the God, not the gods, the God, the football doesn't want a three-peat.
Super Bowl chazaka.
A Super Bowl chazaka. I'm sorry?
The Rebbe said very similarly that we're giving them just enough rope to hang themselves with the Arabs. That same theme.
Yeah, but we're not helping them.
That's what I'm saying. The Rebbe spoke
We're hurting them, of course.
Right.
We're calling it kindness.
You poisoned my YouTube feed.
How's that?
I love my YouTube feed.
What does it mean I poisoned YouTube feed?
Have my YouTube feed is one of my like vices that is just like untainted. Where I can just go when I
relax.
just need some time alone. And I Motzei Shabbos, I'm just doom scrolling through the YouTube shorts, just completely lost. I have no idea what exists. All of a sudden, your face pops up, and I know that this is
Bad.
This is bad.
You gotta
This is what I'm not supposed to be doing, and I'm doing it anyway. And your face pops up, says, you know, a person that knows what they're not supposed to be doing,
They do it
and
anyway.
do it anyways.
That's
That
an
person's an idiot.
That's brand new.
He said, talking about Ruach
Ruach
Shtus.
Shtus.
Yeah, the Ruach Shtus. It's like,
When you call shtus fali, that's a shtus because no one knows what fali means. It's stupid.
Who's following?
Exactly.
That
I just
one?
did it the other day. How did I get out there so quick?
Paltiel, he pops up all the
But the
time.
point is,
You ruined my,
but that's
my
what it
title.
is for most of us. When I make a mistake, it's not. When I know something is bad for me, I do it anyway. I'm an idiot. That's ruach shtus. That's exactly what it means.
Is that why it's a word we don't know what it means?
Right. So we decorated. So they translate it in Sichas in English as folly. Why? They don't want to be offensive. But they're killing the ruach shtus doesn't mean folly. It means idiotic, stupid.
The shtus that they're calling it that.
It's a shtus that they're calling it folly because you missed the point. That was the speech that he saw. I just did it. How did it get up so quick? Weiß ich nicht.
It's funny, it's in Russian. Shoot. Shoot is a name for a clown. It's a clown. It's being a clown to yourself. It means shtus. It's just a clown to yourself.
Anyway, it got through.
Sorry to ruin your night.
Yeah. It's okay.
I didn't
continued.
mean you. I
I
meant-
powered forward.
I'm so happy that you survived it. I would have been so disappointed. You know the story that Yid came to the Rebbe and he said to the Rebbe in Yiddish, I'm afraid I'm becoming your chassid. So the Rebbe said, why do you do it out of fear? You do it out of love. In other words, it's so interesting that we all understand it. We all understand it. And yet we have a hard time. I'm telling you, the biggest klipa is bad habits. Americans, we're good people, but we give in. And the giving in, the portion weakens us.
I don't get the simplicity of the discipline. That having a little bit of discipline is not so difficult,
If it
or
was
it's
easy,
not, or
then we wouldn't have a problem.
it's like tremendously difficult to have a little bit of discipline.
Yeah. But you know what the reality is? I don't know you, but I'm sure there have been moments in your life where you discipline yourself. When you do, you never think it was a big deal. On those rare occasions.
In the moment?
But they fall away. They fall away. The discipline
After.
never lasts.
No. When you discipline yourself, you actually realize that it's not difficult. But the Gemara says that when you give into the Yetzer Hara, it's like a mountain. When you don't use Hara, it's like the string of a spider. It's crushed. It's such a truism. I can't speak. I can speak for myself. I know it in my own life. When I give into the Yetzer Hara, I tell myself legitimately, there's no way I could have defeated them. But when I don't, no big deal. But they're the mice. And it's true in every circumstance of the Kabbalah Sefer. It's true in every case.
But then you tell yourself it's just a ceasefire.
Huh?
It's just a ceasefire. It's going to push off the...
It's only a ceasefire if you
I know
don't...
he doesn't like ceasefire.
Yeah, you also saw
that was another video.
At least I wasn't screaming
That messed
at you.
up my night the night
The
before.
definition of ceasefire is starting the next war. It's so upsetting. I don't understand.
So how, the discipline just pushes off the battle. That's
No, it doesn't.
It's not
It
really-
establishes a new normal.
Well, you're not. It's your being. You're obviously always having that back.
Kabbalah sale is about one step at a time. A new normal. I do this. I do it. I need to do it. Save me. I have to eat something. If I drink and I don't eat some chips. Yeah, I don't eat a lot of them, but I eat some chips. They're throwing everything in the garbage. You have to eat something before they throw it. It's true. It's true. I right now, my current situation is, if I don't start exercising, I'm going to get old.
Oh, wait. What kind
I've
of
known
exercise
this
do you do? I need to know.
10 minutes on a bicycle. 10.5 minutes. So no, the cookies. This
I
is.
thought your
No?
walk is your exercise from Sperling.
Yeah, but I don't.
One salad?
I don't. No, it's okay.
You'll catch up.
You walk uphill.
I don't care. This is fine.
You walk
I don't.
Oh, you're not
If
supposed
I
to
don't
touch
walk, I take a cab. I'm so busy.
Take a cab.
Take a cab. And my excuse is, how much Zeit?
Do you get your heart rate up?
So what else? I did it twice. So call me tomorrow. You have my number.
Oh,
you
you
have my
just
number.
started?
I started because I found this kid who's a former student of mine who says, I haven't put on film until 2013. So I told him, you'll wear film once, I'll do exercise 5 times. He said, nope. I said, listen, I'm going to do the exercise anyway, where about the film later. So I got a little bit of a motivation. So if I do it tomorrow, I'm good. Don't do it tomorrow, I'm back in the sewer. So I find out tomorrow if I exercise. 11 minutes, what's the big deal? It's not a big deal. And it's so important. And it's so good. And I know it's right. What's the big deal?
And then it's to build it up. 11 to be
Yeah,
12.
versteht. I understand that. I understand that. Of course, I understand.
And you cap it at 20.
You have to the point is, it's a gute Sache und so gut für dir, was tust das nicht? It's a good thing, it's good for you, why don't you do it? What's the answer? Stuss.
Especially on a bicycle, on a bicycle, you can listen to Rabbi Paltiel.
No, it's not true.
I know.
Telling it, you know what the Messias is? I'll tell you a secret. I'll tell you a secret.
I got a focus.
I want to tell you a secret. I'll tell you a personal thing.
There's a thing called the pause button.
The Rebbe,
Till the next time.
I saw the Rebbe in dreams every night after Gimel Tamas for a few nights, and then I didn't anymore. It's not important why, but I think I know why. The Rebbe never comes to me. But there's more than one person who called me up and said that Rebbe had a dream about you. And it's interesting because they're telling me things about me that they don't know, which means that they're real, they're true. So I have a student. I'm going to read you something that the Rebbe told her to tell me. For years, she's been telling me that the Rebbe wants me to do the Hayoim Yoim of Chav Tammuz, which is about his bonus. About his bonus. She doesn't know that it happens to be the yard site. We had a son that died. His yard site is Chav Tammuz. And it's a very, very challenging Hayoim Yoim to do, because his bonus every day takes to daven ba'arichas. I did it for a while. The year of COVID, I did it for a while. It's very hard to daven. Anyway, over time, she told me that Rebbe wants me to learn Chassidus every day. I make a living teaching Chassidus. But there's a difference between learning Chassidus to prepare a class. I'm going to read you the words. Hayoim Yoim for you, that's 20 Tammuz, yeah? I was told to ask you how something that calms the heart and mind isn't considered necessary, and the Rebbe has requested it. This is good for you. Consistency is required. Bracha v'atzlacha Yosef Yitzchak. This is real. So I have a hira from the Rebbe through this person. Doesn't matter who this person is, and other people have given me other hiras. I'll give you an example. We didn't go to the oil very often. No, we've been through our nisyonos. My wife and I, the last few years have been very hard for us. So we started going every month. So this girl sends me a message that the Rebbe said he's happy about the communication. I never told her that I'm increasing. The Rebbe told her to tell me, it's a former student, I'm happy about the communication, and then a list of complaints after that. But the first thing was, I'm happy about the fact. So this is nishka gelechte.
But complaints were valid?
Everything is valid. Everything is valid. He wants so much from me, you have no idea. A month. The Rebbe wants a lot. He wants from everybody a lot. Huh?
Wow, you're students.
She's a student of
I
mine.
said, wow, you're students.
Yeah, this is an interesting relationship. Anyway, but the point is, I know that when I learn Chassidus, which takes time, I have more hours in my day than when I don't. And it has to be a liba denafsh. I have to learn Chassidus each day, not to prepare a class, but to learn. Even if later I'm going to take that maimon and give a class, but it's a different kind of learning. So the question becomes, how do you miss a day, you idiot? You know what it does for you. and you experience it b'muchesh mamish. Today I learned, one of the things I did, I did a lot of things today, but I learned a maimed. If I wouldn't learn a maimed, this Farbrengen would not be as good as it is. I'm not saying it's the best Farbrengen in the world, but it lifts me up. It lifts me up. So how could I miss a day? Teretz, I'm an idiot. Ruach shtus. So what's the issue? The issue is, you see, if you undertake a step of growth and you see it as rah, it's not sustained. It passes. You take it and you just say, every day I'm going to do this. Over time it becomes a good habit. And when it becomes a good habit, you never could say it becomes easy, but it becomes part of the routine. And it's very realistic. It's very realistic to take on small steps of growth. One is absolute truth about growth is if you take on big things, it's a waste of time. It's not going to happen. But if you take on little things, realistic things. I'll give you a dumb example. You're a married man. If you make a achlata, that when you finish davening, you put up in a time right away. Now there'll be occasions when it's impossible. But on most days, if you don't do it up in a time right away, it's because you have an excuse why you say, I'll do it later, and then sometimes you forget. It's a simple thing. If you take that on, and you just make it part of your routine, it becomes part of your routine. It's a simple thing. And the same is true. Every step of growth. I had a Farbrengen last night. And it was a different crowd, it was a different Farbrengen. But one of the things I talked about was the concept of little things. I gave them the mashal of two mayors in New York City, successive mayors. We had Mayor Dinkins and Mayor Giuliani. Mayor Dinkins ran, he was African American, and his constituency was black. It was African American. And the taina was that New York City was inundated with drugs, infested with drugs. And who were they punishing? The black kid on the street corner who's selling drugs for $5 a pop, who's going to get shot because he walked across the street in somebody else's territory. The white mafianer who's making millions, no one goes after. And he's right. He's really right. Because the mafia had a free reign in the New York. So he said, Lincoln said, I'm not going after the kid on the street, I'm going after the sources. During his mayoralship, you couldn't walk the streets of Brooklyn. It wasn't safe, of New York. Why? Because if you let people do small crimes, the bigger crimes. Giuliani was a whole different, he was an Italian, a different constituency. He created, and because Dinkins had come before him, he had a clear mandate. I'm going to go after quality of life crimes. You can get arrested for making noise. He went after the little things. New York became a safe city. Now what's the point? Dinkins wasn't wrong. You have to prosecute the people making the millions, not the kid on the street who sells drugs $5. But you cannot build a community if the streets are not safe. And the point was, if you deal with the little things, you will not have to deal with the big things. This is true in chinuch, it's true in education, and it's true in rearing ourselves. We deal with cosmic stuff. You know, what's cosmic stuff? I don't know, Farbrengen, people get up and dance until they see malachim. You know what you have to deal with? Negavas. And it's true of ourselves. It's pasha true of ourselves. It's true of ourselves. If we, into our own lives, start taking on, that's why this group, this guy, my friend Vitalo, I told you before, he's making every day 45 seconds. This means a custom. By definition, a custom is not a law. The Shulchan Aruch tells you what to do, and then Lubavitchers do it this way, Babavas do it that way, Satmar do it that way. But if you go back 1,000 years, and even 800 years, and 700, the meaning of the word minhag means the way you practice the law. Custom doesn't mean extra stuff. What is the custom of putting on tefillin? What is the custom of saying Bechat HaShachar? In other words, I use the word, the Ma'aril is called Baal HaMinhagim. But Minhagim doesn't mean what the Hasidim do because they're weird. It means the law. But not the law with all the machinations and the discussions and the arguments and the possibilities. Tell me what to do. You know, the Rishonim, the Rishonim, which begins with Rashi, and maybe the Rif, and then the Balei Tosfos, and then Rabbeinu Tam, and the Rambam, and so on and so forth, are divided up into two groups: earlier Rishonim, later Rishonim. The earlier Rishonim interpreted the Gemara. They wrote the halachas on the Shas. They interpret the Gemara, and they teach us custom based on the Gemara. The later Rishonim did something very different. The later Rishonim write, this is what my teacher did. The way they established the halacha is not based on the interpretation of the Gemara. The way they established the halacha is based on what my teacher did. And the Rebbe would always say that the Gemara says, Maiserav. If two people tell you halacha, one person tells you halacha because it's written in a book. Another person tells you halacha because my teacher did, that's what you do. That's the meaning of the word minhagim. Today, the word minig has evolved into meaning special stuff, extra stuff. But the meaning of the word minig is, you know, there's a guy, A.B. Rattenberg. You know who A.B. Rattenberg is? He's a singer. He's He's extremely talented and very, very sensitive. He has a song. Daddy, please tell me, what do we believe? Daddy, please tell me, what do we believe? He needs to make a song. Daddy, please tell me, what must I do? How do you wash negelas? How do you say Meida'ani? How do you say Brech Sashachar? Knowing about the time for Shema, the time for... People don't know. From men and women, from boys and girls, I know this because I'm teaching them. They don't not care, they simply don't know. So this guy is making a new group. Every day he just tells you one custom. The one custom means one law. I'm calling it a custom. He doesn't give you sources, doesn't give explanations. He says, this is what we do. 45 seconds. It's a Zaynageya.
How do we join the group?
So I can send you the link. If you have my phone number. You have my phone number for sure, yeah? So I'm going to send you the link and you'll send it.
I'll send it to Ariel.
And then I'll send it to Benji, and then Benji's got it from there.
I'll take this.
Oh, yeah, of course. Does anybody want my card? I got plenty of cards. If anybody wants my card, I'll be happy to give it to you.
What did the Rebbe tell the girl about the communication? That you were going to the oil every month? What is the Rebbe's word?
That he's happy with the improvement in the communication. She didn't know. We started going every month. And the Rebbe said, Ich bin zufrieden. And in the same sentence, boom, 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 boom. This is no good, this is no good, this is no good, this is no good. He's on my case, man. It's a big schus as a chai. It's a big schus.
How would you ever think of doing making
I sent it to Benji.
Okay,
That's
great.
you.
Perfect.
Now I'll send it to Ariel.
Straight to the source.
No, the source is the Eibishter. But you'll make sure that anybody who wants it can get it. And you can join the group. It's 45 seconds a day.
Rabbi, I'd love your spin and your take on a parenting class.
On who?
Parenting class.
What?
About Kabbalah Soul, how to implement that.
Yeah, but I don't think it's mine. I think it's the Rebbe's.
I know, but you know, all the parenting classes now, not to mention names, but it's really like it's a little.
It's about making the children feel safe.
Yeah.
But you know what? That's important.
I know it is.
But that's not
I know it
parenting.
is, but I think it's missing.
That's before parenting.
I think it's missing also a little bit.
Chinuch. The first thing you have to do is make your children feel loved and safe. But that's not the last. In that framework, you have to teach them. You have to teach.
I think the world could benefit from.
You know that when a child doesn't want to do something, and the parent says, "What am I supposed to say?" You insist. Don't get angry. Stand your ground. Children are testing us. Always. When we mean it, they follow. It's who cracks first. It's really what it comes down to. Stand. Don't get upset. The problem with us is we confuse discipline with anger. People who have in their nature to get frustrated and angry, show it to their children. That's criminal. It's a sin. Because it's destructive. The worst midah, it says in Rambam, the worst midah is kas. And I know it personally. It's a terrible midah. And when you're dealing with your kids, You're not allowed to get angry, but you have to stand your ground. Don't get emotional.
What do you tell about the Herren and Kerem?
Yeah, this is a Maise.
Yeah.
It's gedruckt in the Sefer from the Farbrengen Noah. But you don't have to get upset.
Right.
But with your own kids, it gets very hard. When he's in, quote, what is it? You're embarrassing me. When parents say to me, my own kids, it's a child's job to embarrass his parents. It's the parents' job to keep moving along, keep on parenting. So everything that they're teaching about love and safety is true. But that's before parenting. Parenting is educating. And educating is right and wrong. Chinuch. It's so true, it's so true, it's so true. If you don't raise your kids, they're going to love you less, not more. They're going to grow up and say, why did you teach me? Why did you teach me? Why did you teach me? Huh? Come on, Deutsch hat man Teine. Ich denke nicht welche, yeah. The Rebbe spoke when they get to Mihu Yehudi that Goyim are going to cover the time. That we lie to them.
That what?
The law of return, when they broke down the barrier, that the Goyim said, why did you lie to me? Why did you tell me the truth? Why didn't you tell me the truth?
Rabbi, sounds to you familiar, Joel Epstein? He learned in 70 top sheets.
Tell me, I don't know.
My father is a shliach in Argentina. So this week, old man was in the street. So my father started talking to him, and he says his name is Joel Epstein. He's 92 years old. His birthday is in huge Shevat. And he said that he learned since Tov Shin Aleph to Tov Shin, I don't know, Gimel, something like that.
In 770.
In 770.
So you have to ask Yudel Krinsky.
Where is that?
You have to have people who are that
It's
generation.
not from there. He didn't want to put on tefillin.
Yeah.
He remembers the whole year when the three was at college for his mother.
What a sad. And he was able to repeat it.
Yeah, he was.
So you have to get him. You have to record this guy. You have to get
He
him.
didn't want to. Like my father really
Ah.
took a lot from him. He has a picture of him. It's very interesting.
I want to tell you a story. I went to Los Angeles in 1979. I was 13 years old. I wasn't yet 14. And I ended up staying for 3 years. I stayed a long time. It was very good for me to be in Los Angeles. So every Shabbos, I would walk with one of the. I was a kid. I would order the shluchim to a shul. We would do Mesivah Shabbos, and then he would speak in the shul. So we were walking to a shul, and there's a corner, La Cienega, in Wilshire, I think. There's a street in California that's very, very crooked. I think it's called La Cienega. And it's very weird how it... San Vicente. So the street corner was very weird. He says, watch this. We walk over to a man standing at the street corner at the newspaper stand. And he starts to speak to him in Yiddish. And he answers with a perfect Polish Yiddish. This man, this goes back 45 years, which means it's how many years after the war? 35 years after the war. This boy learned in Atvaskin Poland in Lubavitch. He was not in Shanghai. He went through the war. He went through the Shiva Meduna Gehenna. He was in Auschwitz. He was in the camps. Ended up in LA. And nobody found him. He was alone, never married. He showed him that he had wool tzitzis. And he's selling papers on Shabbos afternoon because he didn't have what to eat, Pasha. When they found this guy, imagine, they found him. They brought Rabbi Reichik to him. Rabbi Reichik remembered him. It was Charum genommen, from the old days. And they wanted to bring him in. He was 35 years lost. And by himself, isolated, alone. And at Technika lost, he couldn't allow himself. He couldn't allow himself. When I was standing here with this bacher, he said to him, how much do you make in a week? He says, $140. He was a poshet and oni meduke. $140, you can't get $140 together. This kid should keep Shabbos. Could you imagine that guy would come into yeshiva? He was so broken, and he was so forlorn. He couldn't accept the love. That's how it stayed. I don't think the Eibishter had any kindness to him. I think he has kindness to the Eibishter. Now, I don't know the story of this Bacher. He must put on film. He must put on film. Must. From Tafshin Bay to the Yud Gimel in 1970. Wow. No.
Kept his contact
He
information.
didn't want to give anything.
Nothing. He just disappeared into.
He was with his
Nothingness.
wife walking, whatever. So my father took him. He saw the sign of Chabad house, so he was standing outside. And my father took him and started talking with him. Yeah, I have a picture of him. My father with him.
This is Buenos Aires.
Yeah.
What is your name?
Mendel Lipinski.
The legend.
Oh, your father's my age.
Yeah. My father is the one without beard. No,
Your father's around 60.
yeah, 63.
I was in 770 with him.
He was Tafshin Mem till Dalet.
Till when?
And hey,
So then I didn't know from Arstan, not from 770.
Back to Ariel's point. You said before.
If you don't mind, I want to turn the machines up so I can push and eat.